All right, we are back. We're here again with the final of the big tier lists. We did every unit type, then we did every hero. Now we're doing every lord. Now, with the every unit type, I thought the tier lists were personally useful for campaign and for multiplayer. Some people would disagree, but generally, like, units perform the same in battle before you give them a whole bunch of buffs from your lords and technologies or whatever. When you first start the game, you can boot it up, rush a building and get a unit, and then roughly the tier list is accurate. But in campaign, you can add a ton of buffs. So some people disagreed. The hero and lord one explicitly is multiplayer. There's just way too many campaign lord trees, unique faction specific effects, what level they are versus what levels their opponents are. There's too many things like that to truly do a tier list here. So this will just be their in battle function, which usually boils down to multiplayer. But if you're a campaign only player, maybe stick around and see how your favorite lord does in multiplayer. But let's get into it. Oh boy. All right, you know the drill. S tier is, you probably see them every single game this faction is picked. A tier is, they're still quite good. You're not trolling if you see them at all. B tier is pretty niche. They can work in a couple matchups here and there. C is, they're still niche. They can work in a couple matchups, but they're not like the best choice in that matchup. It's like, okay, in one or two matchups, you're not actively trolling. Okay. D is you're trolling. Never take this lord. All right, first up, Tzeentch. Tzeentch is an A tier lord. Pretty darn cheap. A foot character, so quite tanky. Good combat prowess. A caster as well. Tzeentch really has kind of everything you want out of a lord. Not quite S tier, no mount options. So they're pretty slow. Can't get to the fights they want to get to. Only shadows, lore of magics. It's not like they can heal themselves or anything, but Tzeentch is very good and has her own summon, so no complaints. Tzeentch starts out A tier strong. Durthu. I'm going to put Durthu in S tier right away. Durthu has been a menace since a couple patches of updates. Flock of Doom is currently the best spell in the entire game, and he can spam that, and it synergizes well with his Sword of Daith, so he can just punish any blob of any type of unit. He's an incredible 1v1 duelist. He is very, very tanky. He does have access to some healing on his roster, though it is rare to take a healing caster with him, but he can pair with Zotes, who can have their bound healing help Durthu a little bit. But that's pretty niche. So really, he usually operates without healing and just relies on his insane leadership and tanky stats to stay around. The only downsides to him, but they're not enough to bring him out of S tier, is he is incredibly slow and tall, making him easy to shoot. But he also has Vanguard as a tree, so sometimes he can just spawn behind the enemy and they can't turn their guns in time. Ancient Tree Man, D tier. I've yet to see them win a game, honestly. That's a big negative against them. Oh boy, they just have the Lore of Life, don't they? Okay, or the campaign exclusive Wargrove of Woe. But for the ones you can actually take in quick battle, you only get access to Lore of Life, which is a good lore, but then you're paying a lot for everything, every weakness Durthu has with not a lot of the strengths. They're not very good duelists. They're not that tanky. They're kind of tanky, but they're not that tanky. They have to use all their healing on themselves to be truly tanky, and then it's whatever. They're slow. So it's just kind of a slow, obvious life caster that's pretty darn expensive for what you're bringing, so you might as well just take Durthu. That's the big thing. Let's say Durthu doesn't exist. This guy might rise a few tiers, but it's like, why are you bothering? Just take Durthu. Orion is a B tier lord. So far, the Wood Elves are getting a nice spread. Orion's solid. You don't see him much because there are better lords, as we can see, with Tzeentch and Durthu both being caster and combat lords. But Orion is a solid just combat lord. He has some range component, but usually you just want to use those incidentally, like I'm running at you and I'm going to throw a spear or two on the way, but I am trying to get to you. Insanely tanky, good access to self-healing and defensive stats when he gets low. Orion is unbreakable. He's good for aggressive rush type builds. Not really good at defending or even kiting, honestly, because he kind of wants to just chuck himself in there while everybody else runs away. That doesn't really work out. So Orion, quite solid. Sisters. C or B? I'll go with B, but I could see arguments for C. Flying skirmish, is powerful when it's good, but the Wood Elves used to be good at flying skirmish in Warhammer 2, and CA slapped the crap out of their flying skirmish units and let everyone else have great flying skirmish for some reason. But the Sisters of Twilight don't do that much damage anymore. They do okay. I'm just saying not like crazy damage. And their self-heal is abysmally bad. You have to get so low for it to start proccing, and then when it goes off, it does such a pitiful little heal. You're like, that was not worth the wait at all. But negative things aside, they still have some good sniping tools with one of their abilities, shooting out extra arrows, I believe. They do have that, like, yeah, the Eagle Quiver. The Eagle Quiver can do a little bit of sniping, kind of like an Arrow of Kurnos, but with their single shot, they're good at taking out artillery or poking down horse characters or horse heroes with healing or something. That's nice. Their multi-shot's okay versus armored infantry. They're just kind of in B. They're okay. They're good against the Empire, for example. I don't know if they're optimal. You still might want to take Durthu or Drycha. But I could see them working versus the Empire, like single shot versus war wagons or cannons to take them out. So they're okay, just not great anymore. The generic caster. A tier. Spellweaver. 5 Lords of Magic, Beast, Dark, High, Life, and Shadows can generally get you whatever you need out of a caster. They have good mounts with Unicorn for tankiness or Eagle for speed and flight. They have Arcane Conduit and Blessing of the Ancients for Winds of Magic generation. And then their items are okay. The Opal Amulet's good. Channeling Staff's pretty bad, honestly. But they can get Stalk and Unspottable with Loix Blessing if you want to spend a little bit more. So pretty versatile, good caster. I only put them in A tier because of Durthu. Like, it's hard to justify taking a caster. Oh, Glade Lord, the one with the Prey of Anathema, another B tier. What up so far killing it with the Lords? Only one in D. Everybody else B or above. She is not very good on her own. You mostly just want to take her for her bound Arrow of Kurnos and Prey of Anathema abilities. And after that, just kind of make her as cheap as possible. On her Dragon, she's not a good combatant. On her Eagle, that can keep her safe, I guess. Great Stag's okay. Elven Steed is terrible. So it's like, you're probably going to see this lady either on a Great Stag for some sort of combat on the ground, or an Eagle just to get her up and out of the way so you don't lose your Lord. She's here for triple Way Watcher builds. You know, you net something down with Prey of Anathema, the Way Watcher's insta-kill it, and you keep running away. She's a kite exclusive Lord. If you're rushing with the Glade Lord female, you're having a bad time. Glade Lord male version, the melee one with Helm of Discord. He's not atrocious, but I'm going to put him in the C tier because even the matchups where he works, I think there are better options that you're just ignoring because you want to use a cool Lord. He's decent-ish with his Helm of Discord at supporting some cav rushes, but Orion's a better fighter, Durthu's a caster and a better duelist, and he has Vanguards. It's not like Durthu can't get into the fight. Drycha's a caster, melee hybrid, so it's kind of like, okay, you have to get past all of those, then take this guy just for Helm of Discord. Okay, and then he's a pretty bad melee combatant, unless he's on his dragon. Then on his dragon, let's see what he costs. Get rid of all those. Okay, so Helm of Discord on his dragon, he's 2,250 gold. And Durthu, with Durthu's kit. Let's see here, Flock of Doom, Sword of Death, Wild Heart. 2,400, so you pay 150 more and just get Durthu, who's better in every way, except he doesn't have breath attacks, because a Dragon Lord with only 7,000 HP is not a lot of HP. He's pretty darn squishy. Moving away from the Wood Elves is the Warriors of Chaos or the Demons of Chaos? Looks like maybe the Warriors. All right, Warriors of Chaos Lords. Be'lakor! B. Be'lakor's not bad. In fact, he's one of the most powerful lords in the entire game. But he's also, I think, the most expensive lord in the entire game when he's fully kitted out. And he definitely feels that payment with every step he takes. So he can solo carry some games, but he has a third of your army fully kitted out, which is pretty rough. Be'lakor's all right. He's the correct lord versus Skaven. You could argue he's good versus like Beastmen or Greenskins or someone else who has difficulties dealing with flying, terror-causing single entities. And then he has special further leadership and ITP debuffs that can make him a terror for low leadership factions. And then his Shadow Shroud can give him 60% ward save on a cooldown with his other resists. making him annoying to take out even if you have Flensing Ruin or Traitorkin or Spirit Leech. So he can be good at that. He's not the best duelist that exists. He doesn't have the most reliable healing. He doesn't have a ton of good supportive spells or abilities. So he's not crazy overpowered. He's just strong. He's strong. He'll kill a lot of stuff. And Shadows is a good lore of magic. Demon Prince. This is the undivided Demon Prince. Fire magic, demonic onslaught, Paragon of Ruin. Okay. That's a D tier. 30 armor, demonic lord, just with the lore of fire and then the same combat stats as a lot of other generic demonic lords. I mean, it's okay. It's not great, but on the Warriors of Chaos roster, I don't really see a reason of taking him. Archaon has all of the fire spells you would want, so it's not even like you're hurting for a fire caster. And then why bother paying this much for a generic Demon Prince who doesn't even have armor piercing as his main weapon strength? His weapon strength is not primary armor piercing. That's pretty terrible. So he dives in onto another target who probably has armor and then piss poor dueling stats and dies with his 30 armor and 7,000 HP while archers poke him to death. Pretty bad. S tier Archaon. The lord we see in most Warriors of Chaos matchups these days. And for good reason. Archaon costs an arm and a limb, kind of like Be'lakor, but with insane duelist stats, a relatively cheap mount option, decent tankiness, and really good, really good triple mixed lore of magic. From 3 of the best lores, he took some of their best spells. He has Searing Doom for cheap clearing, Spirit Leech for enemy single entities, Flame Sword of Ruin for support versus demons, Burning Head for frontline clearing versus low leadership or demonic factions, and then he has 2 dogshit spells, but you already have 4 of the best spells in the game, so who cares? Slayer of Kings is insane. Armor of Morkar makes him very tanky if you feel like taking that. And he has self synergy with Kindle Flame. So whenever he casts a spell, his own fire damage gets increased by 20%. So, yeah. Archaon's pretty insane. He's the whole package. He's everything you want out of a lord. Kolek Sanita. See. On other rosters, Kolek might actually go up a little bit. He's not doing great. No one's pretending he's a fantastic lord right now. But he is very much hurt by the roster he's on, not really needing him. It's like, oh, this is your big anti-large beat-em-up duelist who doesn't actually do more damage than Archaon and isn't a caster and isn't that tanky, honestly. And, oh, he's just kind of not the best at anything, and he's still not a caster. So then you have to pay extra money for a hero caster, and it's a whole thing. He's not terrible. He's not in D tier. There's a couple matchups where he can do okay, but I don't think there's a single matchup where he's actually like the best option you could be taking. Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Death, Fire, Metal, and Shadows. Okay. I was just checking to make sure his items weren't different on each version of himself. I think he also goes in C. He's not a terrible character. He's a caster. Okay duelist, depending on what mount he's on. He could be on a steed, manticore, warshrine, or dragon. Good lores of magic, no problems with that. And he has a net in Tormentor Sword. Again, the problem is just, why not Archaon? If you really want a Dragon Lord, you can take these guys. That's nice. I think it's Chaos's only option for a Dragon Lord, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. And does the Chaos Lord have a dragon option? They do. But it's not like any of your legendary lords have dragons on this roster, so that's kind of okay. Again, they just end up in C tier because I can't think of a single matchup where they're actually like the correct choice rather than just, oh, that's not a bad one for them, you know? Undivided Chaos Lord. You, unfortunately, my friend, are gonna go down into D tier, I think, as I look through your stats. Yeah, not very good. Pretty expensive, kind of generic lord. The generic Lord of Chaos is not a caster, so again, you're going to have to take a caster in your hero slot, and then he has some decent-ish stats. He has the Armor of Damnation, which raises his armor by 7 and gives him 5% damage resistance if he's above 5%, if he's above 50% HP. but it's a little expensive for those kind of stats. And then you got Aether Sword, which gives him 25% more damage and armor sundering. I don't know. Doesn't have the most armor piercing unless he's on his dragon, which makes him pretty darn expensive. Yeah. Not great abilities, not great items, just kind of meh all over, making him bad. That's it for the generic Warriors of Chaos. Just making sure I didn't miss any, because the rest are going to be with their mono gods. Let's go check out vampire counts, apparently. Vlad von Karstein. B. He's a foot lord, which holds him back a decent amount, but he does cause terror, which foot terror is nice, because then he can just be crazy tanky while also still spooking everybody. He has a minus leadership aura. He has self-healing in 2 different forms in his sword or whatever, Blood Drinker. Heals him a lot outside of combat, so you don't even have to be in melee. Because sometimes that can hurt with the hunger, where it's like, oh, I'm really damaged, I don't want to get into a fight with anything, but I need to fight something to heal. He's a foot caster, has the lore of vampires, which is pretty darn good, and the Von Karstein ring makes him impossible to kill with like Spirit Leech and stuff, because it gives him 60% damage resistance on a pretty low cooldown. If you save it to counter enemy spells, you'll be generally fine. I put him in B tier because I can think of 2 matchups where he actually is probably the best option, if not tied for the best, but he is pretty darn good against Skaven. Skaven can over-prepare for a Dragon Lord, and then if Vlad comes, you have a lot of anti-air that's now going to waste, which can be pretty spooky. But then again, if you over-prepare for Vlad and there's a dragon, the dragon can also be good. Vlad's solid. Isabella von Karstein, D garbage. It's kind of not her fault. We've talked about reworking her in the past, and I don't remember what video that was in, but her main problem is her gimmick sucks. She has this blood chalice where she can uber heal a single target on a cooldown of a lord or a hero. The main problem is that's limited to a lord or a hero on a roster with some of the most healing and the most self-healing in the game. So most of the heroes she's going to try and heal are going to be like, nah, girl, I'm good. I already healed myself to full. Like necromancers love to heal cap on their corpse cards. White Kings do appreciate the healing, but Invocation and Heck is a spell that exists. Vampire heroes are terrible, but they have immortal will to heal themselves. So Isabella just kind of is a hat on a hat. Huzzah, you have a crazy healing ability on a roster full of crazy healing abilities. I could take anybody else and still heal cap everything that matters. So, rip in peace, Isabella. Rip in peace. Manfred von Karstein, for the first time, S tier. In the books, he is a trash panda, angry little boy man. But in this video game, he is S tier. He's very, very good. Has access to 2 lores of magic at the same time, can hybrid as he pleases between the lore of vampires and the lore of death, 2 very strong spell lores. He has one of the best Winds of Magic generation spells in the entire game. Not spells, items, the Sword of Unholy Power. It gives you Winds of Magic reserves and regeneration, but the reserves is the important part. Most Vampire Counts games, you're going to get down to 0 Winds of Magic left and still spells you want to use. Manfred never has that problem, because then as the game goes later, he can just start chasing down units that are already routing and just getting free Winds of Magic off them as they leave. He can draw out a game nearly indefinitely, and he can be very, very toxic to fight, but strength-wise, quite strong. And with his dragon mount, he's a decent combatant. Not incredible. That's his one weakness, is he's really not that good at 1v1ing or fighting Cav or anything, but he just kind of wants to pick off things that are already wounded, uses breath attacks to good effect, and kind of cycle charge with healing, and then he'll be fine. The Red Duke. D tier. With the criteria that we have set, I'll break the rule occasionally if someone is like so good, but you still don't see them all the time. Like I'll be like, this is an S tier lord, even though you don't see them in every matchup or something. But like the Red Duke very much falls into D tier by the rule. He's not that terrible, but he also is completely outclassed by a lord that hasn't come up yet. And Manfred, sure. He's kind of meant to be a duelist-focused lord for the vampire counts, kind of, but he's not that good at it. He has a potion of strength, which is okay, but it's one-time use. Scroll of leeching is pretty bad, so his items are bad. His abilities are pretty bad because Elsif is outdated. It says it can only target a lord or a hero. If it could target anything on a cooldown, the Red Duke might be viable. He wouldn't even be OP, he'd just be viable. But minus 50% speed, minus 20% physical resistance, minus 40 melee defense. You have to be fighting something that's demonic or has that physical resistance. And then their melee defense needs to be low because your melee attack is already pretty high. The Red Duke has really high melee attack, so lowering their melee defense is kind of, to reuse Isabella's term, a hat on a hat. And then his weapon strength isn't that high. He doesn't have anything to increase his weapon strength besides a one-time use potion of strength. So now he's just the Blood Dragon Lord. Like, that's what I've been dancing around, is the Blood Dragon Lord is everything the Red Duke wishes he was, but better. So why bother? Strigoi Ghoul King. B. Strigoi Ghoul King can be okay in some matchups. He's alright. He has really good sniping abilities, if I remember him correctly. Yeah, because he has Gaze of Nagash and Spirit Leech, so he can bring a double snipe build where the Spirit Leech is good against single entities, and Gaze of Nagash is good against certain single entities, but it's great against artillery or ranged units. And he can just be your sniper lord. And then with his own self-healing, through the hunger, but also his Terrorgeist mount can bring regeneration for him, so like Vlad. And with his sniping characteristics, he can take a fight, back off, and while he passively heals while not being in melee combat, he can just snipe things from afar instead of using his Winds of Magic on Invocation and Heck to heal himself up. Opal Amulet is pretty good for him. Again, he has the Potion of Strength, which is pretty darn bad, but he's all right. He's not great. He's B tier, but he's all right. So now, are these all the Vampire Lords? Okay, I did split them up. So generic Vampire Lord. Oh boy. D. He has a couple okay abilities, but he has nothing that makes him better than anybody else, so there's no real reason to take him, unfortunately. I know that was a quick blurb, but a lot of these guys, I'm going to shorthand some of them because almost all these people can take Dragon Mounts, Hellsteeds, or Barded Nightmares. They all have the lore of vampires, unless I say otherwise. And he has some decent combat buffs, but not enough to put him above the Blood Dragon Lord, so who cares? He's D. Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. A tier. Just below Manfred, because Manfred has a little bit more of that versatility, better Winds of Magic generation, better Lores of Magic, and then the Sword of Unholy Power is pretty crazy. So, Red Duke's just below him at A tier. Really, really crazy melee stats with the Honor or Death Heart-Piercing Sword of Antiheroes combo. You can get like 100% more armor-piercing damage and then 50% more base weapons damage while having damage resistance and extra leadership. And then you can throw down a Helm of Discord to support Blood Knights or Vargeist tearing people apart. This is your premier combat lord. Whether it's 1v1, whether it's as a support to like a cav fight, he is the best of the vampires at supporting anything in melee or dealing melee damage himself. He's just not as good of a caster as Manfred is the only reason he's out of S tier. And Manfred's, a crazy good caster. So bumps him up a little bit, but he is the main reason the Red Duke is in D tier, is just this guy exists. Why bother? Lamian Vampire Lord. She'll go and see. She's not garbage. She has a mixed lore of shadows and vampires, which makes her kind of okay in some matchups. But she kind of lives or dies by Pendulum Strength, the Penumbral Pendulum spell. Because if Pendulum is strong, then she is your box breaker lord, and she's very good at it. Currently, Pendulum is not very good, so people might take her versus Grand Cathay or Dwarves, and they're not actively trolling, but there's better options to try and get through. Again, she has some dueling stats, as they always try and give people, but Lightning Reflexes and Seduction mostly make her tankier rather than deal damage. So if she's on her dragon, you have a dragon for breath attacks and Pendulum to try and break through the front line of the box or make a hole somewhere, but then she herself just kind of avoids combat after that. It's a little difficult to justify her. Necroc Lord. That is a firm D tier. Very cool name. That is the only cool thing about him. Mixed lore of magic between beasts, death, and vampires, but he got the worst spells from some of these. He got Purple Sun, Pan's Impenetrable Pelt, and Curse of Honor here. On the Vampire Counts roster, those aren't very good spells, so you can ignore those. He has really cool Winds of Magic generating abilities with Life Leeching, Wild Heart, and Arcane Conduit all in one. He could just really pump out the Winds of Magic, but he doesn't have the spells to be worth doing that. Okay. Not very good. Strigoi Vampire Lord is a mildly upgraded, but also slightly more expensive Strigoi Ghoul King. And I'm going to put him at the same tier, actually, because I feel like he scales 1-to-1. Like, the Striga Ghoul King saves money and is that much weaker, right? I hope that made sense, but it's like, if I paid $10 for 10 chocolate bars or paid $7 for 7 chocolate bars, I'm fine with either. If I have $10, 10 is fine. If I only have 7, 7 was fine. I don't feel cheated. He just has slightly better combat buffs and slightly better tankiness and healing abilities while having the same sniping spell kit as the other one, but he's more expensive. Heinrich Kemmler. Put him in C. Kemmler deserves better than C, but I just can't put him there. He has some decent support things, but he's really been hurt by Game 3, in my opinion. Horse characters have a very hard time on Ultra getting where they want to be. So if he gets stuck in a bad situation, he's kind of just in it for the duration of whatever fight we're talking about. Then his Krell summon is a foot character, which again, most things in Game 3 are Ultra unit size. So then Krell gets surrounded by little minions and it takes forever for him to get out of them and push through, even with his heightened mass. And a lot of the things Krell needs to go after are fast. Like, a lot of the monsters that have been introduced in these games are fast now, like the Mutant Vortex Beast or the Dread Saurian or Quaddles or anything. So mobility is kind of the name of the game currently, and Krell has a hard time finding that thing to swing at. So his summon isn't as good as it used to be just due to the nature of the meta. Kemmler himself isn't as tanky as he used to be because of the nature of the meta. Like, magic damage is getting crazy easy to find on all rosters. And he has a Cloak of Mists and Shadows to defend himself, which is 75% physical resistance. So if you have magic damage, which almost everyone does, okay, sucks to be you, Kemmler. So he's not terrible, but he's not great. Next up is the Von Karstein Lord, it appears. I don't know how Kemmler got between you and that, but okay. Von Karstein Lord is B tier. So he is, I think, the best Lord in a couple matchups due to having Flock of Doom and Storm of the Night. He's really good at punishing High Elves specifically because they like to get a couple Spearmen, form a box, and then have Flying Cheese with like maybe a Star Dragon and a Phoenix, or 2 Phoenixes, or 2 Star Dragons, you know. But he can take Storm of the Night, which is a Bound Tempest. He can use Flock of Doom on repeat with a Dragon Breath attack on the Spear box that's on the ground. And generally, Flock of Doom is just such a good spell that even if the High Elves don't box against you, he can still get good use out of it, you know? So he's fine. Has Charm Shield to keep himself a little bit tankier, and he's not that expensive. So, yeah, I like him. He's good, but he's only good in a couple matchups. He is pretty niche. I could see arguments for him to go down to C, but I do think in the couple matchups where he should be taken, he is very, very strong. Helmengorst. Put him in B as well. Gorst is pretty good. Relatively cheap. Mortis Engine Lord. A lot of draining. Decent spells, because I mean he has the lore of vampires in him, but he is a pretty cheap Mortis Engine if you just want that to be your Lord for some reason. I found him to be good in Domination. Not like the best Lord per se in Dom, but he's pretty strong. You just put him on a point and let him sit there. The hardest thing for Gorst is, why wouldn't you take a Dragon Lord? They're pretty darn strong, but if you don't want to take a Dragon Lord, he is a good Mortis Engine. Gets a lot of value. Really good in specifically melee matchups. Either the Vampire counts Mirror, he can be strong versus Vampire Coast in certain situations, strong versus Ogres in certain situations. So anywhere where you know you're going to get a nice big melee fight, he's good. He just doesn't want to get shot. Master Necromancer, D. Master Necromancer is pretty bad. You could just take Helmengorst and get a lot of the same things out of him, or take any of the Vampire Lords. Just having a cheap caster isn't really enough to get the Master Necromancer out of the gutter. Whew! Vampire counts had a lot of lords. But we're moving on to the coast. Coast will be a much shorter section. Count Noctilus, S tier. Most often seen on foot to keep him cheap, but he does have a Necrofex Colossus mount, which is not bad, actually. In a lot of matchups, it actually is quite good. But if you want to keep him cheaper, you can just put him on foot. Very strong combatant when on foot, tanky, and can self-heal while having a crazy high melee defense and being a foot model, he can be hard to do any damage to while he's healing himself back up. Has a really good mixed lore of magic between the Deeps, Shadow, and Vampires. And he actually got the Deeps summons, which are very, very good. And then he has his own summons, so double summons, very strong. Then he has the sniping spell Wraithstorm, which is good versus literally everything. Just depends on what you want to get out of it. And all that put together makes him S tier. I mean, the man has no downsides. He's not even that expensive for what he brings. Like, if I take Melkoth's Invocation in the Heck, Arcane Conduit, and Wraithstorm, he's 2,100 gold. If you put him on his Necrofax, he gets double his HP for only 700 more gold. He's good. He's real good. Noctilus is fantastic. Vampire Fleet Admiral of Pistols will be an A tier. Quite a solid, cheap caster lord. Has Black Parafit, another insane Winds of Magic item. Gives you power recharge, 160% power recharge, but more importantly, 2 reserves per second. And they can take Death, Deeps, and Vampires. 2 pretty good lores, and then Deeps is okay, if you really want to go that way. Some of their abilities are whatever, but with a Rotting Promethean mount and Opal Amulet for items, they can make themselves relatively tanky with high armor and damage resistance, so pretty good. Pretty good. Silostra! Down to B tier with you. On foot, way too squishy to use in most matchups. Again, as we've talked about with Kemlar, the abundance of magic damage in Warhammer 3 has hurt Silostra quite badly, so she can't really afford to be on foot, but she can take her giant Rotting Leviathan mount for insane armor and HP stats, so she can be safe. And then she can use double summons with the Crab spell and her Damn Knight's Errant Bound ability. She is nice for Vampire Coast rushes where you know the game isn't going to go super long, so you don't need Invocation of Nehek or healing or summons. You just need, like, well, she has her own summons, but not zombie summons. You just need aggressive summons. So she's good for rushing. Polearm Lord. Honestly, I'm going to put him in D. He isn't aggressively terrible. He just doesn't bring enough that anybody else does. The Pistol Caster is a better caster than him. Luther Harkon is a better fighter than him. Silostra is a better rush lord than him. You don't have any special mount options. You just have the Crab. Yeah, he's just kind of underwhelming. Wand of Jet is an okay ability. Van Horst Speculum is okay, but he's trying to melee buff a roster that has no melee capacity. Like, Vampire Coast melee sucks ass. So who cares about giving them 25% more damage and leadership? Oh, my undead won't break and they do 25% more damage. Pretty terrible. Luther Harkon. Welcome to C tier. His whole problem is he's too expensive. He's far too expensive for what he brings, but he is a terror-causing, tanky duelist who can fly and is very fast, and then he's good anti-mage with his silences on both his pistol shot and his melee attack. So he can disrupt the enemy caster easily. He can Lord Snipe a lot of factions, but the main problem is when he's on his Terrorgeist with the kit you want. Get rid of that. He's 2,900 or 2,700 gold, depending on what abilities you cut. And that is really expensive for a non-caster. That is crazy expensive. And he is more of a duelist, so he's pretty terrible at clearing out anything that isn't a single entity. So then you're paying a lot for a guy who does one thing. So I put him in C tier. I can see a couple matchups where he's not actively trolling, but I really don't think there's any where Luther Harkon is the solution. Aranessa Saltspite, also C tier. There are a couple matchups where her net is quite solid. Her melee stats are very strong, and then her AoE buff is actually pretty good. Kraken's Bane, the bonus versus large and melee attack. Everyone around you just gets 13 extra melee attack versus large targets, which is what puts her in C tier. Specific matchups, she's actually not terrible. Bretonnia, Chaos Dwarves. I'm trying to think of other ones where large units are predominantly your problem. But anyway, anywhere you can guarantee large units, then she's crazy. She can buff up those 400 gold halberds just doing ludicrous amounts of damage to anything, and then she can net expensive targets in a bad position. Like, against Bretonnia, her net versus Hippogriff Knights is pretty insane, because then you can get halberds underneath them, you can get the crabs to surround them, you could get a couple handgun volleys off on them, and all of a sudden those 2,000 gold Hippogriff Knights are just dead if you get the net timed at the right spot, so She actually can be okay in a couple matchups, for sure. Looks like we're on to Tzeentch, the Changeling. Welcome to D tier. He has a gimmick, but he's just far too expensive for the gimmick to be worth it. I can't think of any of his transformations that are worth their cost, because you can't cut down on their abilities. You have to take them with all their abilities. And then some of his transformations aren't even as good as you'd think, because you don't get the mount option you wanted. Like, you can't turn into Karl Franz on Deathclaw, you just turn into foot Karl Franz. So he's pretty much only good for like Be'lakor or Kugath Flagfather changing, and then those are kind of cheesy at best, but you're still paying such a high premium that I think your army is going to be small enough that you'll lose anyway. And Tzeentch has really good lords, so it's not like you're on a roster that's balanced around their main roster being good and their lords are whatever, and then the Changeling can bring a really good combat lord, and then you surprise them. It's like, no, you already have Kairos, you already have the Exalted Keeper, you already have the Chaos Lord of Tzeentch, you already have the Heralds. You have some pretty insane lords on this roster. You don't need the Changeling. Speaking of ones, Arthorial. I have been having a lot of fun with Arthorial, and I recommended him for a specific combo that we'll discuss in a second, but that does not mean I actually think he is the best. I just think in a couple matchups he's fun and fine. Arthorial, a greater demon of Tzeentch with not great combat stats overall, 40 armor mostly holding him down, so he's weak to missile fire, but decent melee attack and defense, good armor piercing stats. The main reason I like him so much is he recently did get a bit of a rework, so now he is not just a caster lord, he is a cavalry support lord. With the Rock of Inevitability paired with standard die, he can make your Chaos Knights tanky, very, very tanky, especially, oh yeah, Plague of Rust. Okay, sorry, it's a 3-part combo. Plague of Rust on the enemy, so your Chaos Knights, who don't do armor piercing damage, can all of a sudden start working on the enemy cavalry. Rock of Inevitability, lowering their melee defense and speed, so when they try and turn and run, your Chaos Knights just hit them in the back and murder them. And standard die, if your Chaos Knights are actually in any trouble, you just buff them up. So I really like him as like a cavalry general who just follows my Chaos Knights around and makes them OP. It's very fun, but very fun does not an OP Lord makes. He is still very expensive. He is rather squishy with no source of self-healing. It can just be tough to be a 40 armor demonic flying lord. His abilities are okay. His items are pretty bad except for the Rock of Inevitability. There's better options. Like Kairos. Kairos is an A or S tier lord. I'll go with A tier because he has seen some nerfs, but man, he is close to being an S tier. Kairos lives or dies by Blue Fire of Tzeentch strength, but he's currently the best Blue Fire of Tzeentch caster in the entire game. He has Blue Fire, Staff of Tomorrow to reset its cooldown, Life Leeching, so every time he casts it, he gets more Winds of Magic total, not just regeneration. Greater Arcane Conduit gives him Winds of Magic faster and makes his Blue Fires hit harder. Oracle of Eternity makes him tanky, then he has a net with Gaze of Fate, and then the Scroll of Destiny gives him more Winds of Magic to keep casting Blue Fire at you, and then the Tzeentch army ability, Tier 1, gives him more Winds of Magic to keep casting it at you, so Life Leeching can give him more Winds of Magic to keep casting at you, and I think he can get into a cycle where he can literally cast infinite, and if not literally infinite, then damn close. Kairos is the second best caster in the game behind Manfred, in my opinion, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but with his net and insane tankiness, he can be an absolute terror, and he can give you a stroke out of a rage from trying to catch him. But terrible melee combatant, so that's his one downside. Next up is the basic Demon Prince of Tzeentch. Mixed lore of metal and Tzeentch, but not the best spells of either, except for Blue Fire. Winds of Change is okay. Paragon of Change is okay. A lot of stuff's okay. I'm still going to put him in D tier, though. Non-primary armor piercing damage, still very squishy. Squishier than Arthorial with less armor and less HP. And he's a worse caster than Kairos. He's a worse fighter than Arthorial, too. So it's kind of like, what's the point? And like I said, he has a mixed lore between metal and Tzeentch, but he doesn't have the best spells of either. He doesn't have Searing Doom. He has Gehenna's Golden Hounds for some reason. And then for Tzeentch, he has Blue Fire, Treason, and Gateway, but he doesn't have... No, I guess those are the good ones. Sorry, I was thinking Treason of Tzeentch was that Glean magic. That's what it is. Yeah, Treason's good, minus 16 leadership. All right, that's solid. So in my opinion, you got the best 3 spells from the lore of Tzeentch, but still, I don't think that drags him out of D tier. He's just worse than every other lord at anything, so what's the point? Speaking of every other lord at everything, bam. This is your real Demon Prince of Tzeentch, the Exalted Keeper of Secrets. Exalted Lord of Change, my bad. With the Metal or Tzeentch options, they are just better than the Demon in most ways. They have primary armor piercing. They have a one-time use summon of Fury, so you can harass some backline units, but it's mostly just this is your better combat version that can also cast Lord of Tzeentch. Staff of Change is not very good. Great Arcane Conduit's fine. This is your middle ground between Zarthoriel and Kairos. Better caster than Zarthoriel, worse melee combatant. Worse caster than... Wait, sorry. Better melee combatant than Kairos, worse caster. Better caster than Zarthoriel, worse melee combatant. Nice middle tier. Village the Curseling, unfortunately cursed to D tier. Rest in peace, my guy. I really like Village. I think he's very cool. And he is tanky on foot, but his spell lore isn't one that favors a foot caster. Blue Fire really likes to be cast from a high angle, so he can't use that spell very well. Low agency, not that low of a price point. The only thing he has going for him is he's tanky, and most of the bird lords are tanky in that they can fly away and regenerate their barriers. He can't. So Village just doesn't really have a purpose to take him right now. Sorcerer of Tzeentch, up to B tier. So finally a cheaper option if you're not going to go for a greater demon, but you still want a flying caster. You can take these guys on a disc of Tzeentch, making them nearly invulnerable to range damage, and in melee they're hard to catch. Lore of Metal and Tzeentch, again, two good lores, and they do have a Chaos Spawn summon, making them very good against Skaven in particular. Arcane Conduit to get War Wounds of Magic, really no complaints, just a good solid caster. Herald of Tzeentch, I'm going to put all the way up in A tier again. Most of the demonic assistant lords are pretty bad, the Heralds, but the Herald of Tzeentch is really, really good. A cheaper version of Kairos, honestly. With the Chromatic Tome, you can get infinite Winds of Magic. If you give it time on a disc, you're very hard to shoot. These guys want to avoid melee at all costs, but if you do that, you'll get a nice, cheap, chipper little sniping lord that is pretty darn good at sniping things out with Blue Fire or Final Transmutation or Searing Doom or Plague of Rust or whatever. Just, if you're going to take them, you need to chain the tier 1 Tzeentch ability for more Winds of Magic constantly. If you're going to spend on the tier 3 or the tier 2, then you should have taken a different lord, honestly. Because these guys are all about just spamming infinite spells into the sunset. That's kind of what they're here for. Chaos Lord of Tzeentch. See. I don't hate them, I just don't honestly see the point of them. An anti-large tanky duelist that's relatively cheap, and you could take a hero caster, but you have some of the best casters in the game, so I don't know why you're pushing down the ladder to second fiddle and getting your heroes to do the work. This guy's not terrible, I just don't see the reason to take him over other options, but he is very, very tanky and good versus large targets. A short section, we have Tomb Kings. Cetra the Imperishable, currently S tier. With the Khemrian War Sphinx changes, he is now good versus everything except for 1v1ing other single entities, but he can roll through any problem, does a lot of damage to cavalry and infantry, cannot be locked down by cavalry or infantry, has one of the best damage spells in the entire game with Usurian's Incantation of Vengeance right now. Cetra kind of has it all, and slow healing from casting every spell and the Tomb King's army ability. He's just crazy. He's cracked. Like I said, the only thing he's really not good at is fighting other things 1v1. His animation set isn't great for them, and his stats really aren't that good. But, yeah. Cetra's nuts. You see him all the time. I keep going to bat for Arkan, and certain people in chat want to fight me all the time, but let them. Arkan is also S tier. I think Arkan is great. Every matchup where you don't see Cetra, you should see Arkan. Arkan has an incredibly powerful summon that I feel like some people forget how annoying his skeleton summon truly is. Because insta-summoning Khemrian skeletons, they're already in that like tight formation, so if you put them directly on top of something, you've pretty much netted it. Whereas zombies, still very annoying summon, one of the best in the game, but zombies can take a little more time to get up on their feet, and then they're spread out and they have to take time to cluster. Like Arkan can just flat out, boom, skeletons, you're stuck in place. Like it blows. So he can peel for himself that way, or just bog down archers. He has death magic with Spirit Leech, so that's pretty good. And then if you cut him down to size, he's actually quite cheap. So you can have a wide Tomb King army, which is brutal. Next up, DJ Kotep, also in S tier. Kotep is also very good. Now, he's called DJ Kotep because of Turin, but honestly, I haven't seen him on his Casket of Souls in forever. This is your cheap caster option for the Tomb Kings. Well, Arkan is already pretty cheap. I'm going to actually just compare their stats. Keep Tombblade, keep Staff, put him on his horse, life leeching, and that is it. Arkan is 1700, which is still pretty cheap. For Kotep, Steed, Lich Staff, Cursed Blades, Vengeance, Restless Dead, Arkan Conduit, Sandstorm. Even with his Sandstorm bound ability, which some people cut, he's still 100 gold cheaper than Arkan. But if you want a cheap caster but don't want death magic, you still want the lore of Khemri, you can take Kotep. You still have Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance, which is one of the best spells in the game right now. His Bound Sandstorm is pretty good. It can usually pay for itself. If you just target it on basic-ass infantry, it'll usually go the right direction and kill a bunch. And your infantry usually sucks so much it doesn't matter if it comes back into you. And he has the plus 15 seconds every time he casts a spell on the enemy spells. So in a lot of matchups, he can be toxically annoying, where your opponent just doesn't get to cast any abilities until Kotep runs out of mana. Which, if you stick to just casting Incantation of Cursed Blades on cooldown, it takes him a long time to run out of mana doing that. So Tomb Kings have 3 S tier lords right now, in my opinion. I think they are all very good. I think any of them are correct in a lot of matchups. I think a lot of rosters would kill to have either of these 3. So good job, Tomb Kings. Khalida, welcome to C tier. Khalida's underwhelming. She's not aggressively terrible, but she is underwhelming. And not just because there are 3 S tier lords on her roster. I honestly think she'd be C tier on any roster. She's very close to being niche, but she's not quite there. Her Necro Serpent mount can be a little janky. It's not that tanky, but then also has kind of horse mount problems in some situations, so she'll just get flat out stuck in a situation and she can't get out of it. Her weird, I have some missile buffs, but I also am just a melee lord, so I want to just be in melee is weird. Her Venom Wave is okay. Her Venom Staff is great, and that's really the only nice thing I have to say about Khalida, but yeah, she just has some pretty weird abilities and not good mount options. And the basic Tomb King, D tier. There's a reason you never see him. Pretty god-awful abilities and items, and then decent mount options, but he's not a caster, which, like, you could just take Cetra, who's a caster and has all the same mount options. So just take Cetra. I don't know. He's pretty bad. On to Slaanesh, as we're already running out of room in some of our categories, but we'll get through it. We'll get over it. Nekari. Nekari's B, actually. Nekari is close to C because Nekari's only good in a few matchups, but the thing is, in those matchups, Nekari can actually win the entire game, and I do think Nekari is the best choice in those matchups, especially versus certain demonic factions where you can get those guaranteed unit kills without having to chase them all the way off the map and kill every single last model. When they just demonic his ability crumbling next to you, proccing his heal for free, oh, Nekari can be a menace. With insane cycle charging capacity, with very high charge bonus and insane weapon strength, especially when paired with the Witstealer Sword, and the Rampage from Pavane of Slaanesh being one of the better spells in the game right now, Nekari can be a force to be reckoned with. Now, 15 armor and 8,000 HP, that's not nothing, but with skirmish cav or light archers available, Nekari's going to have a bad time. So you need to pick some of those factions that are probably going to meet you in melee or have easy to compromise backlines. Easy ways to shut things down, because if you're going to have a hard time getting their ranged units, Nekari's probably going to die. Demon Prince of Slaanesh. They had a brief moment in the sun, but I'm putting them back in C tier. They have some of the most passive buffs and debuffs in the entire game, with Fiendish Musks, Paragon of Excess, and Soporific Musk, lowering your melee attack by 18 passively, just constant minus 18, and minus 5 melee defense. That's all cool, but then I feel like in practice, this guy has a hard time following up on that. He is pretty expensive, so he needs to do more than just be a debuff monster. And he's not great at clearing out things. He's not that good of a duelist in practice. His stats look like he would be, but in practice, he's not that insane of a duelist. And then he has a mixed lore, but he has some of the not worst, but he has some of the worst shadow spells. Enfeebling Foe is okay. The Withering is pretty bad. Pit of Shades is fine, but he doesn't have Melkoths, which is the big one you want from that lore. Then he has Lash of Slaanesh, which is okay. And then Phantasmagoria and Petbane of Slaanesh, which are the better ones. But yeah, he's just not quite there. He's a little too expensive for what you get from him. Exalted Keeper Secrets is also going to go and see a popular pick among Slaanesh players, but I don't think that means they're particularly good. Still very squishy to ranged fire, but they don't have the self-healing of N'Kari. Their healing is more slow based on stuff wavering in leadership next to them, but I find that inconsistent at best and pitiful at worst. So it's not great. Their main reason to be taken is they have an AoE rampage that also lowers melee defense, so they're decent at box busting, which is why they're in C. There are some matchups where they're not actively trolling, but I do think there's better options when you're box busting than an expensive, tall, easy-to-shoot lord, because a lot of box factions tend to have good shooting, so I find that the Exalted Keeper Seeker still finds themselves in trouble, even in the matchups where they're good in. Azazel, however, is a nice A-tier lord. Almost S tier because Slaanesh takes Azazel so often, so by the definition, it's like, you see them every game this faction's picked. Sure, true, but Azazel's also in the Warriors of Chaos, and we don't see him there nearly as often, but we see him a lot there. I'm just saying, Archaon has that locked down, so I don't think he is truly an S tier quality lord. Kind of like the Tomb Kings have 3 lords in S tier, and it's like, wait, we can't see all 3 of them every game. True, but they're all deserving of being in every game. They're great in every matchup. Azazel's just not quite that capacity of a lord, but small, tanky, hard-hitting, good little duelist guy, and he has a rampage from Pavane of Slaanesh, but without the cost of N'Kari or the Exalted Keeper Secrets as being crazy tall and easy to shoot. Azazel's tiny hitbox makes him much tankier to ranged fire, so he's not as easy to pick off. And then when he jumps into a fight, he's also usually blocked by enemies, so then he's obstructed. So his ability to actually jump into a fight and stay there is pretty huge on the reasons I move him all the way up to A tier, whereas the other lords are lower than that. Herald of Slaanesh, D, unfortunately. D. You will see her sometimes because people want to cheap Lords, then go wider, but the problem is she's not that cheap, and then her stats are pretty terrible. She is crazy squishy, even in melee. She just dies super quick. So she has a Mortis Engine effect if your leadership is low, but she doesn't want to be in melee, so she needs to jump in after you're already low, but then who gets them low? Well, hopefully the rest of your army, but then what? Do you just play without a lord for the first part? It's a little awkward. But then she has Locus of Grace, which wants to give more tankiness to units around her, but she's not tanky, so it's like, okay, you run her in, throw down some tanky stats, Mortis Engine for a little bit, then run away. Mortis Engine abilities don't like it when you run away. You're supposed to just drain. So she kind of has some weird, not anti-synergy, but just like not synergistic spells. And she has the same 2 Lores of Magic as everybody else in this roster, so there's nothing special about her. It's like, oh, well, I bring her when I want Lore of Fire. It's like, no, she's still Slaanesh and Shadows. And she has two of her 3 mount options are Chariots, which are both garbage. So really you just want the Steed of Slaanesh, but she's not horrendous. It's just kind of not really there for me. Sigvald the Magnificent, a foot tanky healing lord. He is not bad, but his star is falling since Warhammer 2. Ultra unit size has kind of fucked with him. Now battles are just too big for him to do meaningful damage to infantry or cavalry, and most lords can outrun him. Usually they're on mounts, especially flying monstrous mounts. So they just ignore Sigvald like everybody does. The only reason he's not in D tier is there are some matchups where his combination with the Sorcerer Hero that can provide Mortis Engine and self-heal while casting spells. Some people just want Sigvald for a cheap melee lord because they really wanted their hero to be their lord, quote unquote. You know, they're after the spell casting healing Mortis Engine. They're not after Sigvald, so they just throw out a cheap self-healing defensive lord to not get the Lord is Dead leadership penalty, and that's about it. Chaos Lord of Slaanesh, Droid, Sigvald, and C tier. Similar use case when you really just wanted the exalted, not the exalted, the caster mortal hero that can be on the Mortis Engine chariot. You want that one. This guy does offer his own unique rampage from his sword. He can just put rampage on his sword for a little bit and hit people with it. That's nice. He's not as tanky as Sigvald, but he does have better mount options, so he can actually get around the map. But that's the end of the nice things I have to say about him. Generally, he's pretty underwhelming in most other capacities. Lord Skrulk, A tier. We're on to Skaven now. Lord Skrulk is an A tier lord. He has really, really, really good multi-entity killing. With his Rod of Corruption and Liber Bubonicus, Liber Bubonicus really isn't that good versus single entities anymore. It's okay, but I personally like to just chuck it on expensive multi-entities like the Fireborn or, I'm trying to think, Vargeists, things like that. So he's great if you just want to absolutely slam the front line in melee. With the Rod of Corruption and Liber Bubonicus, you can pretty much one-shot any expensive unit that's near you, or just clear out a ton of zombies and skeletons in the case of vampire counts. Then he is a Foot Lord, pretty darn tanky to anything besides spells. And he has really good anti-demon capacity with his Contaminate and magic damage. Contaminate -10 leadership consistently whenever he touches them, and then the magic damage obviously just getting through their physical resistance. He's a frontline caster general. And he can bring summons to just slow things down, but he's great at holding a front line and not letting it break. So Skrulk's good if you don't want to route. Ikit Claw up to S tier. Can use Flensing Ruin, one of the best spells in the game. I say that a lot, but that's because whenever I get an S tier lord, it's usually their access to best spells, right? If you have access to dog shit spells, you're probably gonna be a dog shit character. So Ikit is a Flensing Ruin caster. He can get infinite winds of magic for the Skaven with unlimited power and some of the best power recharge in the game. It comes at a slight risk to his health bar, but if you put him on his Doom Wheel, it doesn't do that much damage to him. And sometimes if he's moving fast enough, he can honestly dodge the overcast damage anyway. So that's nice. Ikit's a decent melee combatant, terror causing, fast, not that cheap. He's cheap compared to like Nakari, but he's not cheap compared to the whole state of lords. So he is a little expensive, but then he also has good sniping with Storm Demon, I believe. Yeah, Storm Demon. Brass Orb's insane for clearing out infantry, so Ikit just kind of does a little bit of everything. And especially being a terror-causing Skaven Lord is nice, because Skaven don't have a lot of good terror these days. Warlock Master, down in C tier. A lot of the same things to say as Ikit, but just kind of worse at it. It's a slightly cheaper, less good Ikit Claw. Lower stats, worse items, worse abilities, but he is cheaper, I guess. Generally not taken, though, because if you're going to not go with Ikit Claw, you generally want to go with a Greyseer or Skrulk or something different. I just realized I lost my toolbar permanently. Where did that go? I'll have to go find it later as I take a quick look and see if I can find it. Oh no, I missed my toolbar. Aww. 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 I exited out of it, and I didn't mean to. I just accidentally did it. I hoped it would come back whenever I opened Photoshop again, but no, it didn't. Now it's bothering me. Get back to the list. Focus on the list. No. I must find it. I must retrieve my precious bar. Menu bar? That wasn't it. Undo move. Oh. Well, now I can't undo that. Oh, shit. Uh-oh. Undo that. Undo that. Standard screen mode. Okay, good. Where the hell is that? Where the... Later. It's a later problem. It's a later problem. Okay. What were we doing? Oh, no, I scrolled up and down. Damn it. That's going to make editing this a lot harder. 1 second. All right, I started recording again, and then I got a phone call immediately, but we were on the first character. So, all right, let's get back into it with Queek. Queek D tier. So he's supposed to be this anti-infantry duelist lord, but I don't mean anti-infantry, comma, duelist. He's only an anti-infantry single character duelist, which is so specific, and then he's not even cheap. So, I don't know, you could make him better. We made a whole video about how to make him better, but it's like, he can't clear out he can't even just sit in infantry and kill a lot of them because he doesn't do that much damage to them, honestly. He doesn't have self-healing. Not that I'm saying he should. I'm just pointing out why he's in D tier. No self-healing, not good versus infantry, not good versus cavalry, not good versus monstrous units, very slow, no mount options, not a caster. And it's like, okay, he does one thing, and it's rare to get in that situation, but he can kill a single entity that is also an infantry. Big deal. So, Queek, D tier. Deathmaster Tzeentch, B tier. A pretty solid lord. Only kept out of A tier by some of the other things in this roster, but really good crowd clearing with his Whirl of Weeping Blades. He can dive into bad situations and just kind of clear out everything around him and then run away. He has really high speed and decent tankiness in melee with Slippery. You don't want to leave him in an extended fight, but again, with that whole like jump in, spin, and run away, if you just pop Slippery, he doesn't take that much damage on the way out, and he's pretty darn fast. Being a stealth lord, especially with like unspottable with his smoke bombs, he can get very close to targets that don't know he's coming. And then with his net, he can also force someone to sit still while he hits them for a little bit, getting good poke damage off, especially against casters. So Tzeentch can be good in some matchups, and he's relatively cheap for what you get, so it's pretty easy to take one of the Skaven's hero casters along with him. Gracia. Another S tier lord. Different than Ikit, but I think as powerful, maybe a little less powerful, but I do think Graciers are very, very good. With global leadership buffs and then local leadership buffs, they fill in a lot of the gaps in the Skaven roster and make up for any of their insufficient morale problems. Good versus undead factions especially, and with bound spells on their bell for Scorch, like you can clear out a bunch of zombies or other cheap garbage, so they are pretty good against a lot of the undead. You can take either Plague or Ruin, which are both good lords of magic, and these guys are very cheap with high spell resistance, whereas Ikit in some matchups can get sniped out by spells pretty easily. Greyseers cannot, so they are much tankier in that regard versus like Tzeentch or Dark Elves or... I'm trying to think, there's a spell that he always dodges. Oh yeah, it's the Empire. He's better versus the Empire because Elspeth's Dragon misses him 2/3 of the time for no reason. Whereas it'll hit Ikit and like insta-kill him. But yeah, the Greyseer is a really good support lord. Throt, the Unclean. Welcome to D tier. Throt is meant to be this self-regenerating monster hunter on a monster, but for like the whole argument against Throt and putting him in D tier can be summed up in he loses his anti-large when he gets on his Brood Horror. And that is kind of this character in a nutshell. So many of his abilities are just trash for no reason. It's like, what the hell? I don't know. His Rat Ogre summon is okay, but ultra unit size kind of fucked it. Remoldered is a decent heal, but he doesn't have a lot of targets to truly heal with it, so kind of what's the point? Creature Killer lost immune to psychology, so now it's just 16 bonus versus large on a cooldown. That's not even that good of an ability. If it was passive, it would be fine. Not great, but fine. Sorry, it would be a good ability. He would be fine, not even great. But it's a duration, so he only gets it for a little bit, which is pretty terrible. And he's crazy expensive for what he is. No, Throt's just ass. He's terrible. Tzeentch. C tier. All memes about Tzeentch aside, Tzeentch is very cheap if you want him to be, and he can be insanely tanky. You can take him with just the Lucky Skull Helm, and that is it. And he is a 70 melee defense, anti-large, charge defense versus large, 40% damage resistance when he's losing in melee combat lord. So if you're worried about him dying in melee, and you want your caster to be separate so that you don't lose your lord and caster in the same go, Tzeentch is actually really good. He is good in a very specific matchup. Now, okay, I'll get to the C tier part. But he's good versus Khorne, because Khorne often is going to take Karanak to find your caster and just harass them so they can't cast any spells. But if you take Tzeentch, and then a foot Warlock Engineer with Flensing Ruin, and then a foot Plague Priest with the Vermintide Summon, and you keep them apart, you can have one caster safe at all times, and they're all pretty cheap, and they all have decent functionality. Like, the Plague Priest has good melee stats with Contaminated, so he can get rid of some demonic units. Tzeentch is just tanky and anti-large, and then the Warlock Engineer usually has his Mortis Engine. So Karanak and whoever their lord is have a difficult decision ahead of them. That's a niche strategy. Now, I went into all that to say, yeah, he's C tier because I think there's better options even in that one niche thing, but Tzeentch isn't garbage. He is what a lot of lords wish they were, which is insanely cheap. There are some lords that are as bad as Tzeentch, but for some reason you pay like twice as much. It's like, no, if you're going to have a bad lord, just make him cheap so you can at least go with a huge army. Master Assassin is also going to go in C tier. The biggest thing to get the Master Assassin out of C tier and up into B is to make his range attack much more consistent. I have issues when I take this guy and he just like does not throw for most of the game. He has fire at will on, he has 360 shooting, he has fire while moving, and still he'll end the game using 2 shurikens, and it was like an 8-minute long game. There's a part of me that's just like, what? How the hell did you not throw more? What are you doing? So I honestly don't know the answer to this question, but it's like, does he not have throw in melee while a lot of pistol characters have fire while they're in melee, like some of the Chaos Dwarf lords, Luther Harkon, things like that'll shoot while they're in melee doing extra damage and whatever. I don't think the Master Assassin has that, but then even when he's trying to kite, like just run away, I think if you give him movement orders, it cancels his shooting, so it'll take him longer to shoot. Something's wrong with this guy, but he just doesn't use his shuriken much. Outside of that, he has decent items and abilities, like they're actually pretty solid, but his jankiness around using half of his kit is really toxic, so it puts him down in C tier for me. Warlord on his Brood Horror. B. Really good anti-sniping lord. If you're worried about your lord dying, as we mentioned with Tzeentch, you can just grab the Brood Horror version of the Warlord. So he has multiple self-leadership buffs to stop him from routing. He has decent tankiness, he has self-regeneration and high speed, and then he's cheap, actually. He's only, with my kit on his Brood Horror, he's still only 1550. I take Rally and Verminous Valor. Oh, he's 1450. Wow. Yeah, so crazy cheap for a self-regenerating, terror-causing fast lord who is garbage at dueling, terrible at clearing out anything. I acknowledge that, but your whole point of taking the warlord is just to stay alive and run around and be a nuisance. So he's good in those matchups we're worried about getting sniped. That does appear to be all the Skaven lords. Over to the Ogre Kingdoms. Greasy Goldsmith, C. I have some secret Greasus tech that is very fun versus the Vampire Counts. I like it a lot. I don't think he is particularly good. Greasus, they keep buffing him to try and make him better. So here's all the good things about him. Horde Master is nice, +8 leadership for everyone around. Stand your ground is nice, more leadership for everyone around. Cash Cascade is nice, more leadership for everyone around. Over Tyrant's Crowd, damage resistance, and immune to psychology for everyone around. After that, he has everyone as their price on enemy rampage, and he has Scepter of the Titans to make himself tanky. So he is nice at getting Noblars to keep fighting, which in the Vampire Counts matchup is sick, because then they just grind through zombies and they don't abandon my ogres. He's good for that. Greasus' problem that keeps him in C tier is he fails the Devil's Bargain. The Devil's Bargain that the designers of Greasus Goldtooth made was, this lord is insanely slow. He's very susceptible to getting caught in halberds or caught in cavalry or caught by monstrous units and dying. He's susceptible to getting shot decently. He's not that tall, but he's still pretty susceptible to getting shot. He's not a caster, and he's relatively expensive. But he is going to be this island where nothing breaks, everyone fights to the death, and if you fight him himself, he does so much damage, you'll regret it. The problem is they didn't follow through on that bargain because his model is broken. He has so many problems just swinging his damn scepter. So his part, like, everyone around him will keep fighting. That part of the bargain is fulfilled. But Greasus so often just T-poses his way to a loss and does not swing his damn Scepter of the Titans, especially when you pop all of his buffs and you rampage someone into and you're like, I'm gonna fucking do it! And then he just sits there and he like tries to move his mobility scooter 2 inches forward every 3 seconds to get back in range, and he starts to swing and then he moves forward, and then he starts to swing and then he moves forward. I'm just like, just swing, dude! Just fucking swing! Like, oh, he just needs way better animations. He needs a way better detection hitbox. And then he would move up to B or maybe even A. But as long as he keeps janking out and throwing entire games by just sitting still, I can't put him above a C. He's fun, he's funny, and he's not garbage, but he's not good. And I can't, in good conscience, say he's good. Back up to S tier, we have the Slaughtermaster. You're going to see him most Ogre Kingdoms games. relatively cheap for an armor-piercing, high melee stats, fast caster lord with self-healing and infinite winds of magic generation with extra ingredients as long as you're fighting stuff in melee. It is everything you want out of a lord at a relatively cheap price point. Only negatives would be a low leadership. Low base leadership means it's actually pretty easy to route these guys, and not a huge lore disparity, lore kit. Yeah, he has Beast, Death, and Great Maw, which are all very good, and then he has Heavens, which is pretty meh, but not a lot of diverse spell lores, so that kind of holds him back, but that's a pretty weak negative for all those positives. The Ogre Kingdoms Slaughtermaster is pretty darn insane, especially for having armor piercing on a cheap caster lord. Scrag the Slaughterer. B. He's okay. His gimmick sucks, which is buffing up Gorgers. His buff takes too long to charge and it's too hard to charge, and then its end charge state isn't even that great, and you're buffing up a unit that isn't that great. So all that is pretty bad, but then he is still a Ogre Kingdoms cheap-ish casting lord. He has the lore of the Great Maw, which is a good lord. He has extra ingredients, which is a good ability. He himself is a good duelist, like, so his whole gimmick sucks, but besides that, I mean, he's just a base solid character. Thumbs up, good job. I'm gonna move these guys up here because our lower tiers are getting a little full. Golgi Maneater, the man with the name we can't say. I'm gonna put him in C, but I need to shrink C. Welcome to the shrinking. It's gonna happen a lot because there's a lot of lords. Shrink down to there. Golgi! Welcome to C tier. He has a self-heal that's pretty hard to use. I think you have to be out of melee. No enemy presence in ability range, so no one around him in 55 meters, so he has to get pretty far out of combat to use his healing. His healing's nice to have, though. Deadeye is all right, and that's about it. His problem for me in C tier is that he is a melee ogre model, and single ogre models have a lot of jank, so if you're relying on them to do significant damage in melee, I am suspicious. The Slaughtermaster is nice because he has good melee stats for when he happens to get into melee, but his main point is to be a cheap caster lord. Golgi is not a caster, so he has to get all of his value in melee, and I just am sus on that. So, single ogre models, not my favorite. I don't really think Golgi's that good. The Tyrant. I'm going to take heat for this, but I am a Tyrant hater. I do not think he's very good at all. I think he's too expensive for what you bring. Then you need to bring a hero caster, which is not cheap. And this guy has some self-healing when he's in melee, which, okay, other ogres have plenty of healing. Thunder Mace sucks. Greedy Fist isn't very good. Arse Belcher isn't very good. So he's just too expensive to not do very much. He's not that good of a duelist. He's not that good of a crowd clear. He's just not that good. Guy sucks. Ogre Paymaster also sucks. I know Flying Taco likes him, and Taco's a lot better of a player than me, and he's a lot better of an ogre player than me. All those caveats aside, this guy is cheap, I guess, but you could just take a cheap caster lord instead of taking a cheap lord to then take a caster hero. I don't know. Has some okay buffs, but he's held back a little bit. I think Headhunt, a lot of abilities that are like, you can only use this on a lord or a hero, especially debuffs, really need to be unleashed so you can just use them on anything, and that would make debuffs so much better. But the fact that it's only Headhunt, minus 20% missile resistance, minus 40 melee defense on only a lord or a hero, means after the lord or hero is dead, you're just out an ability, which is most of his kit, because he's kind of cheap and has a limited kit. And then, I don't know, melee defense isn't that big of a problem for ogres. Missile resistance isn't that big of a problem for ogres, so it's just kind of like, meh. I don't think he brings much. Nurgle. Nurgy Fergie. Oh, you have more lords than I thought you were going to have. Oh, I thought this would be a free one on the list. Okay. All right. There's a lot of lords in this game. This might be a multi-part video. How many raises did I just do? I did 9. We're over a third through the game. Yeah, I'm going to take a break. This is the end of part 1. Okay, so we're at the beginning of part 2. This is after the patch came out, right? So there were some changes. I did some assessments quick before starting this video. So there's 3 changes that are big enough to be worthy of mentioning for the lords we've already covered. Cetra the Imperishable on his kitty cat mount got nerfed, and Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance got nerfed. Looking at both the nerfs and kind of playing around with them a little bit, I don't think they're significant enough to take him out of S tier. I do still think he's very, very, very good. Even with his reduced turn speed on his cat, even with 100 more gold, I could see debates for him falling to A, but I still think he is incredibly good, and his spell lore is still very solid. So he remains an S tier. No big changes there. The Vampire Fleet Admiral of Pistols. Without their black parapet, and they got Forbidden Rod instead, which does less good Winds of Magic regeneration, 3 times use, and it damages them. Meaning if you're not taking the vampires version of them, they can't self-heal without being in melee, which isn't great for them. So she does fall down to B without black parapet. So that is a pretty big loss for her. And then the last one is Grease's Goldtooth. He's in C tier right now. He got the monstrous impact buffs, and he got Horde Master baked into his multiplayer profile, so he doesn't need to pay for it. I still think he's in C tier, even with that stuff. And I have a separate video about his monstrous impact that's probably coming out before this. But in case it doesn't, it justifies why I don't think that shifts him. But I acknowledge Grease has got buffs. I still think he's in C. So, yeah. All right, let's move on with future stuff. Kugat Plaguefather. Hot take. I'm gonna put Kugath in A tier. Well, yeah, okay. Kugath's in A tier. Kugath is either A or B, but the reason I put him in A is because of what he does for Nurgle when he's off the battlefield. And that sounds really weird, but Kugath is a large Mortis engine, tanky, duelist, artillery piece caster with an insanely high price point. So on his own, when he's on the battlefield, he's a B, right? He is a B. But I put him in A because of this. The threat of Kugath makes people play against Nurgle inefficiently, because you need to have enough ranged damage to take out Kugath in case he's there. And you can play around that as Nurgle and like not take Kugath, but know your opponent is paying that tax. Like if you're playing Slaanesh or Khorne, you know they're going to take the maximum amount of Marauder Horsemen they possibly can in case Kugath is there. And then you can hard rush them with just like Chaos Knights and your own Skirmish Cav and dogs and stuff and just run those skirmish pieces down. Or you can bring stuff like Forsaken or Chaos Warriors that don't really take too much damage from Skirmish Cav. So you can really abuse people that have to pay that tax. Or like Norsca, you know they're going to take some Marauder Hunter Javelins and you can just run them down with like dogs and Forsaken. So Kugath's there. He can make some matchups that are even, in theory, pretty unplayable. Like Nurgle Blobs versus Khorne or Slaanesh, even if they have their Skirmish Cav, can be pretty brutal. I saw a nasty game from Kukinko pairing Kugath with the Arwar Soul Grinder. The Arwar Soul Grinder just shot at Skirmish Cav to remove their ammunition, and after the ammunition was gone, the game was literally over. Like Kugath just couldn't be stopped. So yeah, on his own merits, he would probably be B tier, but he just makes certain matchups unplayable and other matchups inefficient with his presence. So he is very good. They're happy to have him on the roster. Exalted Great Unclean One, also an A tier lord in my opinion. Another Mortis Engine duelist caster, only really weak to ranged fire. And he is a better duelist than people give him credit for. He has significant good stats, can really fight anybody to a standstill. He's a good lad. I take him a lot in the Vampire Counts matchup. Whether I'm Demons of Chaos or Nurgle, I'll take him versus them because he's just great. And I don't really like to blob with him. You can, but like just... And I use like intentionally. It's efficient to blob with him versus Vampire Counts, but I do like to go with a wider build, but then have him as my centerpiece lord. Because if a Dragon Lord lands on him, he just beats the crap out of him, and if they don't land on him, then he drains your whole army. So he's another one like Kugath where you have to kill him at range pretty much. And I'm going to boot up the game for a second because I forgot to have it open on my other monitor. So that's going to be in your face for a second until I can move it. There we go. Demon Prince of Nurgle. I'm going to go with B. See. Some people like him because he brings a mixed lore of magic and some decent stats, but I don't know. He's weak to all the things Nurgle's already weak to, like archers and whatnot. And then his melee stats don't really make up enough, in my opinion. And he's expensive enough that I feel like he should just be doing more than he is. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Demon Prince of Nurgle, personally. As I pull up Nurgle to make sure I'm not forgetting anything about this guy. Yeah, good mixed spell lore, but that's about it. His abilities are pretty underwhelming. Exalted Lord Man of Nurgle. Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Nurgle, there we go. He's going to be an S tier. He's a very, very good Lord. If you put him on his Rot Beast, he can get decent dueling stats, right? Yeah, he gets primary armor piercing, 46, 52 for melee stats, applies poison, 65 charge bonus. He has a constant self-heal from the Crown of Everlasting Conquest, and it just got nerfed, but still, it's pretty darn strong. And then, he has Arcane Conduit for better Winds of Magic casting, and he's not that expensive. Like, I'm going to take him a Spirit Leech, Fate of Buna, Crown, Arcane Conduit, Evasion. I'll keep Evasion because he gets better melee stats. So then he has 57 melee defense base, and he's less than 2,000 gold. So he's very, very good. Anybody would kill to have him. Festus the Leech Lord. I'll put him in B. I'm tempted to put him in C because he is a squishy, not that cheap caster with pretty terrible melee stats and no Winds of Magic regeneration abilities on his own. Like, so it's pretty slow to get spells out with him. But in Conquest, and I imagine Domination, but I know Conquest. In Conquest, he's actually pretty good because he can be a center point on the capture spot. You can just sit there and throw out his healing or switch over to his damage to drain down anybody who comes near him. He's a low profile, so artillery and archers, which normally counter a lot of Nurgle lords, don't counter him. Oh, that's another point for the S tier Nurgle caster lord guy, is he's also not countered by archers. So if your opponent brings like a bunch of huntsmen to shoot Kugath and you just have this small, heavily armored, self-healing chaos lord, that's rough. Anyway, so Festus also benefits from not being weak to the stuff the other lords of Nurgle are weak to. But I don't know, it's not enough to get him in the A or S tier. He's just B. He's middle. He's fine. Herald of Nurgle. C. Suffers from a lot of the problems of the other heralds, but, well, that being he pays way too much for being demonic when he doesn't actually get that much from it. He's very squishy. Squishy, expensive, slow, unless he's on his Rotfly mount, which makes him even more expensive. And then he has the Lords of Death and Nurgle, which are both good, but every other lord on this roster seems to have that combination, so you're not special. The only real positive for him is he has Locus of Fecundity, so he has his own AoE 3-time use heal, but that alone doesn't drag him up from C to B or A, in my opinion. Honestly, it takes him out of D, so be happy with what you get, I guess. Tamarkon, the Maggot Lord. B. I think he's quite solid. His Toad Dragon's just got some buffs, a couple patches here, but I still think he's honestly just best on quote-unquote foot. Though it's weird to call an ogre mount foot. Has some solid melee buffs for himself, is a decent price point, but mainly you just want him as his base stats beat stick. With 20 bonus versus large, he has 76 melee attack versus large targets, and he's nice to just throw in there against the enemy. Relatively tanky, has access to healing from Nurgle's tier 2 fecundity, so you don't even need to take Fleshy Abundance necessarily to heal this guy up a little bit. And then he does go unbreakable. Well, he is naturally unbreakable, but he has that thing, which I'm trying to find its little unit card. Feast of the Maggot Lord right now, so he gives himself a little heal when he's going to die. And if you have him near an enemy lord or hero, you can get a nice snipe out on them. So he's good versus factions that you know you're going to have like foot characters. He's honestly okay versus dwarves, decent versus Skaven. Things where you know the lord isn't going to be fast enough to truly get away from you, which I guess Skaven take Ikka Claw a lot these days, but I was thinking of the meta where they take the Grey Seer more often than not. And I still take the Grey Seer a lot versus Nurgle, so I'm scared of Tamarkon, but I suppose a lot of people do take Ikka Claw. Epidemius, D tier. One of my picks for the worst lords in the entire game, D tier. Epidemius sucks, D tier. Epidemius is terrible, D tier. I don't even need to explain to you why he's terrible. If you don't already know, then you don't know this game, D tier. Epidemius is terrible, D tier. I feel like I made my point. Expensive, slow, doesn't do a lot of damage, and his buffs are counter-synergistic because he waits for nearby units to die so that he can buff up demonic units, which your demonic units are almost always going to be your first units to die. So then your mortal units are going to be standing around, and Epidemius goes, listen, I got nothing for you, kid. And they're like, cool. Why? So yeah, Epidemius blows. He's terrible. Finally, the Chaos Lord of Nurgle. I'll put him in A as well. Not a caster himself, but he pairs well with the hero caster of Nurgle, who can be on a War Shrine, and then the War Shrine can slowly heal everybody around him, and then he can cast spells. And while he's off doing that, the Chaos Lord of Nurgle is just a self-sufficient beatstick who's great. If you put him on his Rot Beast, he has armor piercing. Rot or Die is a good buff. Paragon of Decay is a good buff. Icon of Eternal Virulence is a good debuff. Father Blades is good. So he's around 2,000 gold for this really good combatant. He does make your build a little small because you're going to have an expensive caster next to him, but you can cheap out on that caster. I just find that strategy less effective than going with the War Shrine, but he is very hard to kill, and he has crazy good stats. On his Rot Beast, he has 63, 62 melee attack and defense, so he's good. He's no pushover. Norsca, we have 2 whole lords until the DLC. First up, Throg, the Troll King, C tier. Throg's not terrible. He has some niche applications with Norsca. He can take his Wintertooth Crown and make dogs unbreakable, especially like Norscan Ice Wolves. You can make them unbreakable as they're about to leave, and then they just get out their last bits of damage, and it can be very good. I like him a lot versus like Slaanesh. So he's good for that. Fight or Die is decent, and then he is a self-regenerating Frostbite anti-large lord, but I have had a lot of issues with Throg recently where I feel like he just falls over a ton and spends most of his game on the ground, and that's tedious and annoying. So, boo. Wulfric the Wanderer. Now here's where I wrestle with my own criteria, because Norsca is a special case of desperately needing more lord options. So S tiers, you'll see them every game. A tiers, you'll see them most games, right? True. But comparing him to other lords on this list, which is part of it, right? Part of it is their own roster synergy, and part of it is just how they compare to other lords. I think Wulfric has to be B tier. Now, I could see arguments for him being A. I think he's between B and A, for sure. But he does still need help, and he's taken all the time for Norsca for lack of better options, not because people actually really want Wulfric the Wanderer. So I do feel putting him in A or S is a little disingenuous, just because this roster has 3 freaking lords, and one of them is the generic lord. So, yeah. I can't, in good conscience, put him in S by a technicality. Seafang is good. It's a good win spell. Hunter of Champions is a good debuff, but it only applies to lords or heroes, which I feel like increasingly in Game 3, we're finding the best debuff abilities are ones that can affect anything, because its flexibility makes it more worth it to take a debuff lord than like a lord who just does damage or is cheap. That flexibility of debuff spells is really good. So Wulfric's a little limited by that. On his horse mount, he's an okay duelist, but his armor piercing is a little lacking at points. So he has to be on his mammoth to get significant armor piercing, but then he's crazy expensive and squishy to ranged fire because he's all of a sudden super tall and easy to shoot. So Wulfric just has like, he has a bunch of trade-offs rather than things that are just outright good in his kit, and that's a problem. So, I mean, Hunter of Champions is good, sort of Torgald is good and things like that. What I mean is like, his warhorse has no armor piercing and it's small, but his mammoth is tall and expensive and easy to shoot. Like, you know, thing like that. It's not like Cetra where, yeah, take his cat because his cat's really good and there's no downside to it. Wulfric actually has to make decisions. The Norscan Lord is here. Oh yes, we are doing generic lords. Okay, I was like, is this the legendary lords list? Norscan Lord, the chieftain guy. Marauder Chieftain is in D tier. He's pretty bad. He's not cheap enough to truly be a cheap lord. He has all the same mount options as Wulfric the Wanderer, and Wulfric's just better. He has the Potion of Foolhardiness, which sucks, and the Flaming Axe of Cormac, which you can pay 200 gold to get flaming attacks as long as your leadership is higher than 50%. So, I don't know. It's like kind of a, it's an okay buff, but it has a stipulation on it and is expensive, and it's like, whoa, okay. That seems weird. But no, he's not that good of a duelist. He's not that good of anything. He's just kind of bad. On to the Thin Glizzies. So this is where I'm probably missing a lord, because in my heroes tier list, we had the red-crested skink chief, which means I took him out of this list, probably. No, he's there too. Okay, so I just put him in both. I doubled up. All right. Tehenowin! Tehenowin is a B tier lord. He's actually not bad. Not a bad guy. Good old Tehenowin. Beastcaster, which Beast is still strong even after the Flock of Doom nerfs, and he actually got a buff. Ooh, this is going to be interesting to talk about after the Stegodon buffs, because I have a lot to say on the Red Crested Skink Chief. All right, good. Anyway, Stegodon's got some buffs, so one of his mounts is a little better, the Engine of the Gods. He has Arcane Conduit for better Winds of Magic casting, so some of his items are a little overpriced, honestly. They're both 200, and one of them is okay. Like, 20% damage resistance whenever he casts a spell for 20 seconds is, like, weird. It's not terrible, but I don't know if it's 200 gold good. So Tehenowin's just alright. He is kept in B by other stronger casters like the one I'm currently holding, being on his roster. Mazdamundi S tier, baby. Has the lore of high magic. So he has a self-heal while he himself can be on Zlock. So he himself can be the terror-causing duelist monster and then heal himself, which is pretty nuts. He has the Sunburst Standard of Hexawaddle, which makes him even tankier. Some of the best Winds of Magic generation with greater Arcane Conduit. Shield the Old Ones for on-command damage resistance. Bound Banishment, Bound Ruination of Cities. Mazdamundi is crazy good. Often quite expensive, but like I said, he can support himself. He's like... He's not quite as good as a Dreadsaurian in melee combat, but it's kind of like having a Dreadsaurian that is also your caster, where it's like, normally when you take a big monster, you have to spend extra to get the supportive mage, but he's all in one. He's really good. Followed up by Slann Mage Priests. Also S tier, also very good. Cheaper than Mazda, a little worse than Mazda at several things, but they make it up into S tier due to their flexibility. Since they have so many lores of magic, you can bring a bunch of different kinds of Slans, and they still have Greater Arcane Conduit, they still have the Shield the Old Ones, they still have Banishment. They get Blood Statute of Spite instead of Ruination of Cities, and Ruination of Cities is better, but the flexibility in their lores of magic definitely makes them deserve to be S tier. They are amazing lords that anybody would love to have. Nikai. A tier lord. Nikai is very good. He is outshone a little bit by how good the Lizardmen Lord roster currently is, but I do think he still deserves a spot in A tier. After buffs he got several patches ago, I have been loving Nikai. I think he's one of their most fun lords. He has good buffs and debuffs for everything around him. He has a really good animation set. He has pretty darn good stats. He is just really solid. The main problem is if you take him, you have to take a caster hero, which the Lizards have an okay caster hero. We discussed that in the hero tier list. But it's not great compared to Slans, so it is hard for Nikai to get a word in, and you have a different combat lord who is also really good on this roster. So again, these aren't to put down Nikai or say Kroq-Gar, spoilers, Kroq-Gar is better. Kroq-Gar isn't better, but it's like, all right, in the times you have where you want to take a combat lord and you're willing to take a caster hero, it's Nikai time? No, it's Nikai or Kroq-Gar time, depending on. So it's like, he's just crowded. It's a crowded roster full of great lords, and he definitely feels that. Kroxigor Ancient. I'm going to put him in C after I shrink this tier a little bit. Shrinky dink. Kroxigor Ancient goes into C tier as well. He has some decent animations, though I feel they're a little less reliable than Nikai's are. Unless I'm just misremembering, but I feel like they don't have like the Dancing Man run, which the Dancing Man run is really, really good. They have some decent buffs in Monstrous Strength, and then Horn of Kygor is okay. Amulet of Itzel is a one-time use, 60% damage resistance, so I don't know. They're just kind of budget Nikai, which why bother? You can just take the real thing. So they're okay. Gorok, D tier. Suffers from a lot of the same problems as Queek, who's also down here. He is a tanky defensive foot lord, and he's like, haha, I'll never die. And then everyone goes, cool, and just flat out ignores him until the end of the battle. And then he either gets army lost or spirit leeched to death. But I don't know. You have a lot of tanky lords on this roster already, so it's not like the Lizardmen are hurting like, God, our lords just keep getting sniped. We can't possibly keep them alive. Like, no, the Mazda's great at healing himself. Slans are great at healing themselves, and Nikai's tanky as shit. Kroq-Gar's pretty fast. Like, This isn't a roster that struggles with squishy lords. Tehenowin can ride a giant Stegodon, for God's sakes. Like, I don't know. So Gorok's just easily ignored, and then he's a tax on your army, who brings nothing, unfortunately. Right. Oxyotl, D tier. In yesterday's new player tournament, we saw Oxy win a game, but that doesn't mean I believe in this guy. His missile strength has been heavily outscaled in Warhammer 3 from Warhammer 2. Now units can generally just ignore him, and his low HP pool gets very hard punished. Like, Scarbrand can straight up two-shot this guy. Rancid Visitations can two-shot him. Like, his low health pool is bad in a roster of greater demons running around and everybody getting increased weapon strength to deal with ultra unit size. He's just kind of like still less than 4,000 HP. Rough lord, so he has a tough time. And again, it's not all about him. It's also context. So it's like, okay, why would you take Oxy when, if you're not going to take one of your amazing caster lords, you could take Nakai, you could take Krokgar. Is it really more worth it to take Oxyotl than any of those? And like, then you have a half-assed hero caster? Okay. Unfortunately, Tic-Tac-Toe also suffers a lot of the same stuff. Now, he makes it to C, whereas Oxyotl makes it to D, because there are a tiny amount of matchups where I do take Tic-Tac-Toe, one of which is the Dwarf matchup. If you need specifically a flying small lord, Tic-Tac-Toe is your guy. Like the Dwarf matchup, I don't think that matchup is Lizardmen favored, but the build I have where I do okay is Tic-Tac-Toe, just because he is not gigantic. So Thunderers, Cannons, Iron Drake, Trollhammer Torpedoes can't just light him up, because Slaans have a hard time dodging the cannons. Nakai and Krokgar get melted when they try to enter melee. So Tic-Tac-Toe just being teeny tiny can really help. And then when he gets low on HP, you can just use him to harass gyrocopters and run around the map with those. So anyway, that's too much on a specific matchup, but I'm just trying to say he has a niche, whereas Oxyotl doesn't really. So, yeah. But Tic-Tac's not great, unfortunately, right now. Krokgar, joining Nakai in A tier. He has all the same drawbacks as Nakai, where it's like you're sacrificing Slann, so you better make it worth it. But whereas Nakai is more of a generic wrecking ball that runs around the battlefield and disrupts formations and is a problem, Krokgar is a little bit more of your sniper duelist. I say sniper because of Hand of the Gods. Hand of the Gods does good damage versus anything. So you just need to pick like the most expensive, most important target, hit it with Hand of the Gods on cooldown, and then have him anti-large, duel, whatever you can, cause terror. But unlike Nakai, he is less generic. So there are more wrong decisions you can make with Krokgar than Nakai, right? So you need to play better to make Krokgar more worth it than Nakai. If you're not confident in your abilities to pick good fights, take Nakai instead. But both of them are very good melee lords. Saurus Old Blood is going to go into D tier. He's not that terrible of a lord. The problem is he is outshone in literally every way by Krokgar. So there's no reason to take him. He brings, I think he has the Horn of Kygor. Let me pull him up again. Yeah, he has the Horn of Kygor. He has the Amulet of Itzel. He has Stand Your Ground. So he's kind of supposed to be this AoE buffing combat lord, but I don't know. He just doesn't really have a lot of stats. He's not very good. Grace is wandering around. Hi, Grace. Have I seen Hazel? No. All right. Lord I most wanted to talk about. Red Crest Skink Chief. Hazel's right here. Yep. Anyway, sorry. Talking to the wife about the dog. Red Crest Skink Chief got some pretty massive buffs because his Stegodon got buffed. And he got Colossal Strike. So this guy is actually getting up into A tier. And I need to play around with him more, but he might be in S tier. He's kind of insane, actually. So on his Stegodon mount, he has 2632 for melee stats, which is not very impressive, but he is a giant terror-causing, armor-piercing, crazy tanky guy. But then he can take Colossal Strike Foe Seeker. Foe Seeker for Vigor regen to give him his stats back in late game. Colossal Strike for more damage and bonus versus large. Warrior's Quest to give him 40 melee attack and 24 melee defense on a 90-second cooldown. Opal Amulet for damage resistance, and then you can cut Potion of Strength. With all that, he is 2,600 gold, so you might want to cut Foe Seeker just to make him a little cheaper. But he is an insanely high-statted giant melee monster. Like, it's pretty crazy. And then you can take a healing through either the Rev Crystal or the Skink Oracle to try and heal him up a bit. But I don't know. I think he's low-key. I think he's low-key strong. I think people are sleeping on the Red Crest Skink Chief after those buffs. He's demanding we pay attention to him. Next up is Mother Ostankia. I think she's in C. Her abilities have taken several nerfs. Her lore of magic is pretty awful overall. After she got the lore of hags added, it's just not a very good lore. She's pretty expensive. She's an artillery chariot. I don't know. It's mostly her price and her bad spell lore that hold her down into C tier. Her unit function, if she didn't pay for the magic and stuff, she'd be okay. Like, she still has good abilities in Goulias and Spirit Bear. She still has Crown of Claws, which makes her pretty tanky. Her artillery shot's still good, but I don't know. She's been left behind since she lost her old lore of magic. Rip. Zarina Katerin gets an A tier. Very powerful lord. Can ride a Frostworm for terror, tankiness, and speed, and then decent dueling stats. But a lot of people like her for Frostfang. If you're going to take an Ice Caster anyway, because she doesn't have access to Tempest, obviously, but Frostfang, her bound ability is really good. It's just that little crown that shows up underneath your feet and then stabs upwards. It does a bunch of damage. It's pretty darn good. She can still summon a little snow leopard for a little dueling companion. She's good. She does have a lot of mount options besides the Frostworm. She has her sled, warbear, warhorse, or on foot. So you can do any range of her being combatant to cheap and evasive, you know? She's very flexible. She's a great lord. She's a great lord. Gestalten! You're a terrible lord. Just terrible. I was just shrinking him. I don't actually think he's in B. I'm trying to decide between C and D. I'll go with D. I think Gestalten's real bad. Shrink again, D tier. Shrink again. We're going to make you real small because we're going to keep adding people to you probably. So Gestalten's down there. He's supposed to be this constant AoE buff lord with, like, he has self-healing from Ursun's Ward, Courage of Sacrifice, Enduring Devotion, Blaze of Devotion. So he has a bunch of, like, stats he gives AoE. But the main problem is his price, and then you have to take a hero caster if you want to cast her. And also, Kislev's not that great in melee, and he doesn't really give them the stats they need. They aren't lacking for melee attack, melee defense, leadership, things like that. They need, like, more damage. Because if he rides around with Griffin Legion, I mean, the Griffin Legion don't do that much damage, so their melee attack and melee defense are already fine. They don't need that. They need... Well, I'm not saying we give Griffin Legion armor piercing, but it's like, they could use, from a buff, they could use armor piercing damage, they could use more damage, they could use armor sundering, like... So that's not the stats the Griffin Legion need. For your infantry, I mean, your melee infantry isn't overall great, but their melee attack and melee defense are solid. Yeah, no one says armored Kossars can't hold or can't do damage. It's just if they're against armor-piercing infantry, they're gonna die, but of course they would, so. He doesn't have, like, berserker infantry to hang out with and buff them up. He has no buffs for ranged units, so it's just kind of like, all right, Gestalten, who is this for? Your roster doesn't need these kinds of buffs. They could use buffs, but, like, other kinds. They need damage buffs or armor sundering, like we said. They don't need more melee attack and melee defense, so. Gestalten just doesn't offer what the roster wants out of a support lord. So, yeah. Ice Witch joining Zarina in A. They are just a cheaper version of Zarina with the access to Lore of Tempest if you want it, but then they have less good stats and they don't have the Frostfang. So they have Ice Shard, which is just worse. So you usually skip that one. But, you know, you pay a little less and you have access to a different lore, the Lore of Tempest. They're not bad at all. Frostworm Mount is still amazing. They have the Snowflake Pendant to get power recharge, whereas Zarina has Arcane Conduit as their only form of recharge. So they're good. They're good. No real complaints. Boris Ursus. Unfortunately, C tier. He is very cool. And he can do a lot of damage, especially to large targets, and he can be a good, solid fighter. That's a lot of positives. The main thing that holds Boris back is a high price point and then no access to healing. Now, not everything in the game should get healing. I know healing is very strong, yada yada, but unfortunately, without healing, it does hurt your ability to be a duelist. And I think if I'm not trying, this isn't a video about balancing Boris, but I'm just saying, like, if Boris was a cheap duelist, you wouldn't be as worried. But how expensive he is, he's a significant part of your army. So then you usually want to bring healing for him, because otherwise you're just going to let a significant part of your army get chipped down by Spirit Leech or Flensing Ruin or Final Transmutation. And every hit he takes, and dealing with bows and arrows or cannons, like, so he needs healing if he's going to be this expensive. And then you have to bring a Patriarch. Well, then neither of those is a caster. So then you need to bring a caster. And before you know it, you've spent half your funds on 3 heroes. So Boris just has no real synergies. Now he's in C, not D, because he himself is an incredible stat stick, and he will slap a fool. So he deserves to at least be out of D, but it's mostly his in-roster anti-synergies that keep him out of going higher. But, I mean, if you stat him out, he'll kill an Exalted Bloodthirster. Like, he will kill a fool. So Boris is scary. Okay, Druzina. Druzina's weird. Yeah, Druzina's weird. They're a hybrid lord, but they have some decent abilities, decent hybrid stats. Mainly, they're going to go into C tier for restock. Otherwise, I'd put them in D. They aren't that expensive, and they have a lot of hybrid shenanigans going on, but none of them are good enough for me to be like, yeah, that's worth bumping up a whole tier. Until you add restock, that's pretty good. They're good for Little Grom Kite. You can give Little Grom more ammunition when he's about to run out, and Little Grom will almost always pay for himself. You can also use him in some really degenerate skirmish builds versus like Khorne. You can give your war sleds or horse archers more ammunition as you continue to kite away. So that stuff's all pretty good. And then honestly, low-key overpowered, well, not overpowered, but low-key a good strat is in the late game, you can give Armored Kossars more pistol shots, which they love. Armored Kossar's pistols are very strong, especially after the unit gets wounded and they don't want to participate in melee anymore. You just flip them into range mode and they get a couple shots off onto stuff. If they get through their 6 ammunition, bam, restock them. It's quite nice. Boyar! Boy he bad yar. Welcome to D tier. Not cheap enough to be just a cheap fire and forget lord. Doesn't have really good buffs or debuffs. Doesn't have really good supportive abilities. Yeah, just kind of tragically underwhelming character. Because if you're going to stat him out and make him like a real duelist, you might as well just take Boris Ursus, who's better at it. So, yeah. Just kind of bad. And then same is going to be the Ataman. Ataman is a pistol Kossar lord, armored Kossar variant lord, I guess. His pistol doesn't do that much damage. His stats aren't that good. And again, same as his Boyar cousin, it's his buffs and debuffs just aren't that good, so he's not really scary. Yeah. On to Khorne, huh? Skarbrand. B. Skarbrand's a B. Here's what we're going to do. All right. We know there's a lot of factions left, so we're going to shrink every category just preemptively here. We're just going to make this all a little smaller. Although my A tier has been getting progressively smaller. It looks like a xylophone. Look at that. Look at that. Look at how big Drycha is compared to that Frost lady at the end. Oh, it's funny. It's funny how jank and terrible I am at everything. Whoop, we grabbed the engineer. What are you doing, engineer? Get back in there. We're not ready for you yet. Anyway, Skarbrand. He's B tier. He's not terrible. He has an AoE rampage, which is nice. He has a self rampage, which gives him an insane amount of weapon strength. Skarbrand's main problem is that he can have a hard time finding a fight, and he can get shot a lot, and he's very expensive. But outside of those 3 things, he is actually quite solid. Very good stats, decently strong animation set, lots of good things. So, Skarbrand, you're solid, but not amazing. Exalted Bloodthirster, I'm going to put you in C. Exalted Bloodthirster isn't actually that bad. The problem is just comparing him to other Khorne lords. There's usually better options. like Valkia exists, but the Exalted Bloodthirster's not terrible. A Flying Lord, relatively tanky, and does he have self-healing now? That's actually something I have to remember. No. Okay. If he had a Gore Drinker or whatever where he slowly healed up, then I'd be like, never mind, B or even A tier, but yeah. He's just a stat stick, a flying version of Scarbrand without a rampage for the enemies. He's okay. Demon Prince of Khorne. D tier. Terrible. Bonus versus infantry, which is unnecessary. Mediocre stats, 60 armor, 7,600 HP, whereas his cousins, Exalted Bloodthirster has almost 1,000 more HP. Scarbrand has almost 2,000 more HP. So, meh. Terrible abilities, worse abilities than either the Exalted Bloodthirster or Scarbrand. Because the Exalted Bloodthirster at least has a breath attack if he wants it, and an explosion if he wants it. Otherwise, they share the same abilities. And Scarbrand just has better abilities than both of them. So, no. This guy sucks. There's literally no reason to take him. Valkia used to be an S tier lord. After her nerfs, I'll put her in A. She did just take some nerfs on the last patch, but Spear Slopnir is really good for clearing out any factions' infantry on their front line, just causing a bit of disruption. Demon Shield makes her crazy tanky, but also her small stature and good stats make her quite tanky. You can see the picture is 100 gold off because there was a patch since I photoshopped these all out, so that's the nerf I'm talking about, but she's still pretty good. If you take off Scarlet Armor, if you take off Demon Shield, she's down to 1750 again, which is very, very reasonable for how strong she is. You can also take off Gaze of Khorne. Some people do, make her only 1600. So she's good. She's still a very solid lord. Arbol, the undefeated, just got buffed. He got a little cheaper, and some of his abilities now charge faster. Destroyer of Khorne and Thirst for Challenge. Their effect intensity takes less time to ramp up. Yeah. So that's okay. I still think that just kind of lands him in B. He used to be in C before those buffs, so it's a buff. It's good. He has decently high stats. He's not that tanky, but he is also a little cheaper than some of your tankier options. He has an explosion, which does a lot of damage. He has a chaos spawn summon, which is nice, but Arbal's just kind of okay. Khorne has a lot of good lords, so he has a hard time breaking out. Maybe an unpopular opinion here, but Skulltaker might challenge Valkia for being the default Khorne lord. Maybe. Relatively cheap as far as Khorne lords go. They're all quite expensive, but he can be on his Juggernaut mount, Bloody Onslaught, got all those for 1650, which is not bad. He has a bunch of buffs, but honestly, I skip a lot of his buffs because he already has crazy high stats, so he doesn't necessarily need the melee attack and leadership. And I know the melee attack and leadership is for everyone in range, but Khorne in general already suffers from melee attack overload, and they're very expensive, so I tend to like to cut some of his buffs and just keep him cheaper so I can go wider with my army. And he does fine. Can also be on his Blood Throne for a little bit more money, but it does give him extra tankiness in his self-regeneration, and then you also have better buffs for everybody. So, you know, he's fine. The main reason I put him in A is Bloody Onslaught. We mentioned it earlier in my recording here. I don't remember if I did my first recording, but when we talked about Wulfric, we said Hunter of Champions is getting outscaled because the good debuff abilities that are more worth it than just damage are debuffs you can cast on anything at any time. Bloody Onslaught is that. Minus 24 melee defense and minus 30 armor on any target makes it really good to use on like Chaos Knights. Like you can help your Chaos Knights against other heavy cav by debuffing them significantly. So Skulltaker, low key, I think is going to creep up on Valkia for being the meta lord. Cultist of Khorne just got some buffs. Well, what is he? He's the Blood Speaker. Yeah, whatever. He just got some buffs. So in theory, he's mildly better. I'm going to try and start a second row. No, we're not quite in second row territory. We need to get a little smaller. Yeah, smaller. Anyway, he got some buffs. He's a little cheaper, but I don't know. I generally still don't think he's particularly good. He has a bunch of, like, in theory, neat niche abilities, but in practice, I find there's just better options you could be taking at any point in time. You know, you have a lot of great lords. It's not like you're hurting for them, so why bother? Kind of similar with the Herald here. The Herald is the prime example of what I was just talking about with Skulltaker with like the melee attack, melee overload. Because he is so good at buffing up your melee stats on a roster that already has cracked melee stats. So it's like, hey guys, you want leadership and melee attack? And your Bloodletters, which have 43 attack versus infantry, are like, nah, we're good. Your Forsaken have 42 melee attack base, or like, nah, we're good. And your tier 1 army ability of Khorne, debatably your best army ability, gives 24 melee attack AoE. And it's not that like extra melee attack is bad. It's you're paying for it, right? This Lord isn't free, and there's other options. So taking a Lord to give you even more melee attack when your roster has a ton and you have access to it in your tier 1 army ability, I find it just to be a little redundant. Like, now if you told me, oh, hey, would you want your Bloodletters to get 5 more melee attack? I'm like, for free? Sure, I would love that. Not for game balance, but if I'm the Khorne player, right? Oh, 5 more melee attack for free? Sure. Yeah, what if I told you we're getting rid of Valkia to do it? It's like, no, I'd rather have Valkia. So I don't know. I don't think he's particularly amazing. Chaos Lord of Khorne is in D tier. Not because anything about him is bad, more because nothing about him is good. Like, he doesn't bring many positives. He's not that expensive, but he's not cheap. His mounts are okay. His buffs are pretty whatever, and his combat abilities are pretty bad. So it's like, yeah, you bring nothing. You are trash. Alistair the White Lion, not technically available in multiplayer for some reason, but I'll still assess him because it's not going to be that hard. Global fire resistance, 1 buff for himself, heroic killing blow, and then he can ride a Star Dragon, but he's worse than Imrik, so he would go in C tier, in that you'd want him in just matchups where you really need fire resistance, like versus Chaos Dwarves, or maybe Khorne, I guess. But no, Alistair, even if he was included, wouldn't even be like a meta lord, so rip. Rip Alistair the White Lion. Eltharion the Grim, A tier lord. I think he's really good after all of his buffs and then nerfs and then buffs and then nerfs. His Mistwalker's Barrage got rebuffed to being strong again, so he's good at just diving into any situation and getting constant slow damage down, which is nice. He's a high caster, which high magic isn't incredible, but on a duelist lord, kind of like Mazdamundi, he can just heal himself, which is nice, and then you don't have to pay for an additional caster to heal your lord. And then he can also have Tempest to help him win air duels. He can bring Soul Quench to harm foot-based heavy infantry. So he has some diversity in his magic, but mostly he just wants that apotheosis. Eltharion's pretty good, terror-causing. He is a bit spendy, but these days he tends to just around do what you need him to do, and then he's still your caster. Alarielle the Radiant, hot take here. I think she's C. The problem is healing got too good in Warhammer 3, so then being the lady that does a ton of healing, I know that seems weird to say that healing got too good, so therefore she's bad now, but it's like, you don't need Alarielle to heal cap the Fireborn, to heal cap Imrik on a Star Dragon, to heal cap anything. Regrowth can do it more than sufficiently. Earthblood spam can do it more than sufficiently. There is so much healing in this game, and it is so jacked out of its mind that she has just been outscaled. The Star of Avalorn, the last couple times I've seen someone cast it, like in our Legendary Lords tournament, if the Phoenix King is playing as Alarielle, the Star of Avalorn looks kind of pathetic compared to Regrowth. Like, I just barely see their health bars moving, and I go, okay. And then Overcasted Regrowth drops down, and I'm like, now that's healing. And she doesn't even have access to Overcast Regrowth. She has Earthblood. So it's like, man, you don't even have the best healing spell in the game. You're supposed to be the best healing lady. I don't know. And then she has AoE magic attacks, which she gives to people, but everyone and their grandmother is getting magic attacks anyway these days. She's just getting outscaled. So unfortunately, I think she's C. She's not D. She's not useless, but I think she went from being like a really powerful lord in Warhammer 2 down to being like, you're not trolling if you bring her, but there's always a better option. Teclis goes into B, a very good caster with a hybrid lore of magic. Teclis mostly suffers from his better mounts being prohibitively expensive. Like, I can't justify Arcane Phoenix for Teclis. It's just too much money. But yeah, he has a good mixed lore, a lot of good spells on there. He has a lot of good abilities. His main problem that keeps him in B is just his insane cost. He is a very expensive character, almost no matter what you do. Even if you put him on foot with Sword of Teclis, Kindle Flame, Great Arcane Conduit, and then Flock of Doom and Regrowth. Let's do that. He's 1250, which is pretty expensive for a foot caster, right? You'd want him to be cheaper. So he is a good caster, and he's not in C or D. We're not saying he's a bad character. I'm saying what keeps him out of A or S, being like truly a strong, you should take this in most matchups character, is his cost. So he's B. He's niche. Tyrion has been having some glow ups. He's been getting buffs after buffs after buffs. His Sunfang just got some more buffs. So Tyrion's an A tier. Can only be a foot or a horse character, so he can't fly. He's not a caster like Eltharion. So he is held back a little by those. But with truly insane melee stats, and then he can take Feint and Riposte for even more melee stats, he is crazy good. Sunfang is great for clearing out cheap infantry, and then he has his own self-heal, so he doesn't necessarily need a healing caster. In fact, I made a video about please stop taking healing casters with Tyrion. Just focus on, well, if you want to heal stuff that isn't Tyrion, or just take a damage caster of some kind. So Tyrion is very, very good. He's not that versatile, you know? Eltharion is versatile. He can be taken in a lot of matchups. Tyrion, it's like, well, you kind of need something where their lord isn't going to be flying necessarily. Their infantry isn't resistant to fire damage. You don't want a healing caster for whatever reason, but he's good. Olethanar just got buffs. I don't think they're going to take him out of C tier. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I haven't seen a lot of tape on Olethanar on this patch, so I'll start with that. Fair, sure. I haven't seen a ton of Oleth. You got me. But I don't know how much that matters. His Moonbow got a little homing, but he is still a foot archer lord in Warhammer 3, and even he took some nerfs in a way because foot lords just got this thing where they get knocked down less, so it should be easier to hit Olethanar. So it's not an overall nerf. I do think overall he got buffed, but foot archer lords are just not having their heyday, and he is the epitome of a foot archer lord, so Olethanar is just down there. Needs more missile strength if he's going to be relevant, or faster reload time, or a cheaper price point. The High Elf Archmages. First S tier lord for the High Elves. They're crazy amount of spell lores, true flexibility, and then cheap price point with really good items and abilities. They have Arcane Conduit. They can take Book of Hoeth if they want. Armor of the Stars to go unspottable, and they can have a cheap flying mount in the Eagle. Or they can go for a Moondragon if they want to be kind of a pseudo carry in their own right. There's a lot to love about the Archmages. They're a fantastic option for a caster lord. Their combat stats are pretty piss poor, but you don't pay for combat stats, so that's okay. Like, they're not that expensive. Imrik is another solid lord. I think I'm going to put him in A. Other patches he would have been in S, but Imrik's star has fallen a little bit, and just a little bit. He's still very good. But Eltharion can kind of match him for cost effectiveness in that Eltharion is a self-healing caster guy, in that Imrik will need assistance. But Imrik on a Star Dragon mount has the flexibility Tyrion doesn't, since he's flying and can have his breath attacks. Tyrion's kind of stuck in the fights he's in. Imrik can do a lot of good damage to blobs and stuff. But Tyrion has a self-heal. Tyrion is a bit tankier in melee. Tyrion has better stats. So Tyrion and Imrik are just two different versions of your hyper-elite combat lord, while as Eltharion is a bit more of a generalist. But all three of them serve a lot of good niches for the High Elves. All three of them are solid combat characters in their own right. Very good. The Noble. The Noble suffers from Imrik being on the roster, because Imrik is just a better version of the Noble, but he gets into C tier because the Phoenix King takes him a lot for fun. But he does show me that the Noble isn't bad. The Noble has some good buff stats. He can be on a Star Dragon, but the Bane Shield is kind of weird, so you can usually cut that one. But after that, the Blade he has is good. Stand Your Ground's fine. Deadly Onslaught's fine, so he can do some decent work. High price point, though. Really high melee stats, to be fair. 68 melee attack on his dragon mount. And what's Imrik's base melee attack on his dragon? 74. Ooh. Ooh. You're a buff boy, Imrik, goddamn. But anyway, yeah, still really good stats, still good missile resistance and stuff. And he is a little cheaper than Imrik. A little cheaper, depending on the kit you take, but overall going to be cheaper than Imrik. The Princess, however, I don't know. I think she's pretty bad. I've seen people try to make her work. She is a skirmish lord, and we just got done talking about how skirmish lords aren't exactly vibing and surviving at the moment. And she suffers a lot of the same things. I think she has an Arrow of Kronos type ability. Let me shrink down this section and then check it out. Because we're going to need a second row, so I got to shrink them. All right, Princess, pull you up. Volley of High Arrows, yeah. So she has an Arrow of Kronos, and then she has 2 one-time use, not even good items. Like, these are the most outscaled things I've ever seen. Guys, 100 gold for 24 melee attack and 30% base weapon strength. That's really strong. Not really, it's okay. But then to know it's a one-time use, that's insane. You should never take that. Same with her Horn of Vol. So really, she doesn't have any items, because if you're taking them, you're trolling. And then it's like, okay, you have Foe Seeker, some reload skill. So her items and abilities are all, besides the Volley of High Arrows, trash. And then she's an okay-ish combatant lord. So there's just way better options. Princess blows. On to the Greenskins. Still 9 factions left. We're muddling through it, you guys. We're doing our best. Where's Egg? B. Where's Egg goes in B. Warzegg's taken some well-deserved nerfs. When his Bonewood Staff used to be global, he was an S-tier crazy OP lord, and he's taken nerf after nerf since then. But he's not terrible. Lore of Big Wa is still a good lore of magic. He still has his bound net in Effigy of Degit. Bonewood Staff is still around. It's just a AoE buff around him, but it's not usually worth it, honestly. Has some really good Winds of Magic regen through Squiggly Beast. And then Spleen Rippa doesn't give him armor piercing anymore, though. That drops him down from A to B. So he's just kind of a squishy caster for the Greenskins. A little pricey. As Ag the Slaughterer, I'm going to also put him in B. He has Death Magic, which is a very strong lore of magic. He can have a Flying Mount, and he has really good constant leadership buffs for a faction that can struggle with leadership. Those are all great things to say about Azhag. The biggest problems are he has no Winds of Magic regeneration abilities, so he can take a really long time to get his spells out. Skullmuncher makes him very expensive and not that tanky, with only 7,000 HP and 70 armor on a flying monstrous mount. Makes him pretty squishy, honestly, because then when he lands, he gets surrounded easily by stuff and hit by a bunch of things at once. But, yeah. So, he's expensive. He doesn't have good Winds of Magic regen, but he does have good leadership buffs and a good Wind of Magic, so he ends up in B. They kind of all balance out to him being fine. Grimgor, unfortunately, is going to be a C-tier lord. He's useful in a couple matchups, but I wouldn't say he's optimal in any. Like, I take him versus the Warriors of Chaos, but that's more of just because I love Grimgor, and that's a matchup where he's not bad. But there are better options to take instead of Grimgor. He is a foot duelist that keeps getting buffs, but keeps suffering from just being a foot duelist. He can kind of churn through infantry with some of his more recent buffs to Bloodforged armor and stuff, but it's just a bit expensive to take a non-caster foot lord when the Greenskins kind of need to go wide. So if you take him, you're paying a good amount of money, and then you need to take a hero caster, which can be cheap, but if you take like the River Troll Hag, you're spending a good amount of money, and then your army just suffers in width, and you'll get whittled down. So Grimgor's not terrible. There's just better options, and we're gonna get to some of them, but he's in C. He would be in B tier if certain other combat lords for the Greenskins didn't exist, which we'll get to. But if you're taking a non-caster lord, you have some crazy good options that aren't Grimgor. Savage Orc Shaman Man. He's gonna go into D. He has a Wyvern mount, which kind of is okay, but he's pretty expensive. He has less good buffs than Azhag does from his Wyvern mount, and all the same problems of the Wyvern mount. Low HP pool, lower HP pool, and lower armor than Azhag gets on his mount. Doesn't have the same Winds of Magic generation as Wurzag. He just has a one-time use Power Stone, and then he's a caster. So he's a worse caster than Wurzag. He's a worse Wyvern Lord than Azhag. There's no real reason to take this guy, and he is not cheap. Not cheap at all. He's, with the kit you probably want, he's about 2,200 gold. So, yeah. Night Goblin, Great Shaman. Why do I keep messing with where the screen ends up? Stop doing that crap. All right. Stop the recording so I can fix that. Whew. All right. Night Goblin, Great Shaman guy. Arachnarok Spiders just got buffs. I think that moves him up from C to B. If you want a Lore of Little Wa caster as your lord, he is very sufficient. He can ride a spider, which can make him tanky, and a kind of sort of decent anti-large duelist, kind of after the buffs. Still not great. Still not great. But his ability to cause terror can reduce some of the terror routing you suffer. Now, he still has 65 base leadership on his spider mount, which is rough. So he is still going to route frequently. But again, if you want a Lord of Little Wa casting, he is very sufficient for that. He's very good. And as don't even try it, abound to use Arcane Unforging. Skarsnik, another B tier lord. Greenskins have a lot of B tier lords. Like, that's kind of the problem, and why no one yet has made it up to A or S is because part of my criteria that I don't always perfectly adhere to in the case of like Wulfric the Wanderer, but like A and S are, you see them a ton for the Greenskins, and these guys are all like very acceptable, but since they're all very acceptable, they kind of mooch off of each other's power. So Skarsnik is your tanky, anti-large, my lord cannot die, I absolutely need him to survive this matchup lord. And then he has the Fermented Fungi Rampage, where you can just, if something gets close enough to you, you can point and click at it and force it into a bad fight, which is very good. Then he has They Need Stabbing, what's his thing? Spite at a Bad Moon, to give something a bunch of anti-large and more damage, especially Boar Boy Biggins. You can make them even harder hitting against cavalry that you have debuffed. So Skarsnik can do really good. He is just a foot lord though, so it's hard to get him where you need him to be. But he is tankier than the Night Goblin war boss. A little more survivable. Grom the Paunch, hey man, where do you think I'm going to put you? Welcome to B tier with a lot of other Greenskin lords. Grom is still solid. The main reason you don't see Grom much anymore is Stone Trolls aren't the current meta for the Greenskins. Boar Boy Biggins are, but Grom is like born to buff Trolls. He's still good for other stuff, but if Trolls were meta, he would be A or S tier. Giving Trolls ITP is pretty insane. Now, though, he is just your regenerating lord. He is tankier than Skarsnik with Lucky Banner and his self-regeneration. He is good in matchups like Nurgle or Dark Elves, especially now that Dark Elves got the buffed Doombolt. He can withstand those if you save his Lucky Banner just for when Doombolt's coming in, and then he can regenerate up the damage. So in certain matchups where your lord is going to get sniped by spells, Grom is still amazing. He has really good AoE buffs. His dueling hasn't held up from Warhammer 2 to 3, but that's not terrible. Like, he is still a really good buff lord, really tanky, pretty fast, can get into good situations, so Grom is still pretty good. Gorbad Ironclaw is going to go down into C with Grimgor. His buffs for his allies are very fun and very cool, but his price point is just a little high. And he has one of the things where stats-wise, looking at a stat card, he should be B. But for some reason, in experience, in my used time with Gorbad, both watching tournament games and playing games with Gorbad, something doesn't add up about him having 100 armor and 50 melee defense. For some reason, he always gets hit. He just always takes damage. And I can't tell you why it happens. I honestly can't, but he just does. He always gets hit, and he just gets whittled down. Despite how good his melee stats are, I just can't keep him alive. Like, there's definitely some user bias on this one, but Gorbad has burned me too many times. I'm putting him in C tier. I don't know why this dude can't just dodge a single shot. He just can't do it. Night Goblin Big Boss. Finally, I got to the guy I can talk about. So everyone else is in B tier. Grimgor and Gorbad are in C tier because of the Night Goblin Big Boss. An S tier lord. Immune to psychology because he's riding his squig. Very cheap price point for what you get out of him. Decently high leadership, good speed, armor piercing stats, 53 melee defense. The Night Goblin Night Goblin War Boss is everything you want out of Greenskin Lord. He can bring Spite of the Bad Moon, and he's faster than Skarsnik, so he can get to the fight where you want to use that anti-large buff. He has Fermented Fungi to rampage things in a bad spot. He has his own bound spinning loons, which are crazy at clearing out blobs of either cavalry or infantry. And he has Tormentor Sword for a secondary net and debuff after you rampage something. The Night Goblin Big Boss is insane. He is everything you want out of a lord, and it is very hard to take any of the other Greenskin lords and put them in A tier when this guy exists. They're B tier at best because they're useful in some matchups, but I can't say that they're useful in most because he's up there. And the Orc War Boss, all the way back down to D tier. Just kind of terrible. Yeah. He has a Wyvern mount, but he suffers from all the Wyvern mounts of the other characters we mentioned, but he's not a caster, so then you also need to take a caster on the side. He has less HP than Azhag. He has the same armor as Azhag, I guess. Smash him faster is a decent buff, but that's really the only thing I have to say about him, and he's pretty darn expensive, so no, he's trash. Trash. Garbage. Whew. All right, let's take a look at the upcoming factions. How many lords do you guys have? Are there any more juicy ones? Oh god, Dark Elves have a ton of lords. Okay. Demons of Chaos might not have any, because we already did Be'lakor, so they honestly might not. Oh crap, they have Svarak and all those guys. God. It's never ending. It's never ending. I'm trapped in this forever. Grand Cathay. Yenbo. I'm gonna go with C. I don't think Yenbo is that useful in many matchups, and the couple he is, there are better lords, but he is okay. He has net and his execution, and that's really all you get out of this guy, is his execution stats. Now, unfortunately, he is very expensive, which is why he's in C tier. His actual kit, if you like blocked out how much it costs, you'd be like, oh, that's a B tier lord or an A tier, he's pretty good. And then you see his price point and you have a heart attack and die. So too expensive for what he brings, but he can turn into a giant terror-causing dragon. He can get executions, and yes, he can get that sick net into Iron Hail Gunner combo that everybody loves, but I think that's more gimmicky than actually, like, consistently strong. Miao Ying is going to join him in C tier. How the Mighty have fallen from one of the most popular and strong lords at the launch of Warhammer 3. Miao Ying suffers just from not being Zhao Ming, which we'll get to next, but she is very expensive. She has a mixed lore of magic. She has some good spells in there, Regrowth and Earthblood and Talons of Night and Missile Mirror. Those are all solid. So you might be like, wow, how is she not OP? Well, the problem is Grand Cathay doesn't have anything to heal, really. The Terracotta Sentinels are bad. The Moonbirds are bad. The Lions just got some buffs, but they're more cheap. They don't really need healing. Miao Ying can use the healing, but she doesn't clear that much stuff on her own, so she needs to spend that Winds of Magic on Talons of Night to clear out blobs. But then if you're spending the Winds of Magic on Talons of Night, then you can't spend the Winds of Magic to heal Miao Ying from the damage she's taking, and she's not that good of a duelist. You could use Regrowth on Zhao Ming, except he's a lord, so you can't possibly have Miao Ying and Zhao Ming, and even if you could, he has his Van Braces of the Sun. So the main problem is Grand Cathay is just not a roster that needs Regrowth. They don't have things that need healing. A lot of their damage comes from making a box and shooting the piss out of you before you get into that box, and it's like, yeah, okay, nothing here needs healing. So she's just not very good, unfortunately. Like, she would be good on other rosters, or if any of her melee units were worth a damn, but since they're not, meh. And speaking of units that are worth a damn, Zhao Ming, S tier. Very good yes. He licks them to death as a dragon. His very good mixed lore of magic with Plague of Rust, Dragon's Breath being the two main spells you want out of him, but he can take Final Transmutation if you want to punish Hero Hammer Blob if you're afraid of that. So he has good flexibility in his spells. He has a self-heal and damage resistance buff in the Burning Van Braces as long as he's in his dragon form when he gets that popped. He has Arcane Conduit to get Winds of Magic faster, and he can cast his best spell, Dragon's Breath, from his dragon form, meaning he very rarely has to be in human form for any reason. Zhao Ming is very strong. His only downside is, like the other dragon siblings, he is expensive, but at least he is more worth it. So Zhao Ming is the default Grand Cathay Lord. He's very good. Dragon-Blooded Shugenin Lord is an A tier Lord. Oh, I need to stop hitting that button. I saw it go a little to the side, so I'm going to try and fix that without having to redo the editing there. Dragon-Blooded Shugenin Lord is a really good lord. She is overshadowed shadowed by Zhao Ming, but I still like her a lot when I play Grand Cathay. A relatively cheap caster lord who has some crazy combat stats for what she is. 55 melee attack, 40 melee defense when on a Jade Longma for a basic caster lord is actually jacked. If you take her with one spell, well, people usually take Ancestral Warriors and Storm of Shadows, so let's do that. And then cut everything but Arcane Conduit, and she is 1,500 gold. On her Warhorse, she's only 1,300, so she's pretty good. Pretty darn good. 1,600 gold, sorry, but yeah. She's good. It has really good combat stats for a caster lord, so can hold her own in fights that you don't think that she normally would be able to. she's nice if you don't want to spend the gold on a dragon sibling. Celestial General is a B tier lord after getting some buffs. He can ride a Celestial Lion, which is a very good mount. He has Lord of Grand Cathay, which is a good buff ability for your allies. Brass Cleaver is also a good buff for your allies. And then Celestial Sweep is great for clearing out cavalry or infantry that are blobbed up around him. Celestial General is quite strong. He's just not crazy OP, right? And again, he could use healing, but Miao Ying is a lord, so she can't heal him. So, yeah. He's just fine. Solid. Lord Magistrate. D. He has some neat buffs, but he's not worth it over any of the other Grand Cathay Lords, unfortunately. Inspired Assault, Inspired Defense are okay, especially for cavalry. But the rest, his items are pretty terrible. His mounts are not great. And he's not really a combat lord. He's not enough of a support lord to be that. And he's not a caster, so... yeah, Lord Magistrate's just bad. There's a reason you've almost never seen him. The Empire. Elspeth von Draken. Used to be S tier, has taken several nerfs in a row, and I think that brings her down to just A. Still very strong, but is a bit expensive on her horse mount, so to be truly worth it, you honestly have to take Elspeth on her Carmine Dragon, and then that is a crazy expensive mount. You pretty much guarantee the enemy lord is going to die, though. With her Spirit Leech, Death's Timekeeper, and the Carmine Dragon Breath Attack, the enemy lord is toast. So the Empire is threatening with her, and she's an A tier. She's very good. Just a bit expensive. Yeah, just a bit expensive. Her combat stats aren't incredible. She's tanky, but she doesn't do that much damage. Speaking of doing damage, Karl Franz, baby. Karl Franz also lands himself in A tier. Does often need the support of a regrowth caster. So he needs healing from his friends, but he definitely makes use of that healing. A great duelist, a great AoE support lord, really good mount options with Deathwing is the main one he needs, but also Horse Franz isn't terrible, Foot Franz isn't terrible, but Deathwing is really all you need. Armor piercing, small profile, great mass, great unit. Karl Franz is amazing. On the other side of not as amazing, we have Volkmar the Grim. I'll put him in C tier because there is a worse character than him that's coming up. But Volkmar has the Jade Griffin for self-healing. That keeps him out of D tier. Everything else about him would be in D tier, but he is self-healing. He can be unbreakable. Or did they change that? Is he unbreakable base? I'm trying to remember if it's still just on his War Altar. Okay, his War Altar, yeah, he's still unbreakable. Any other thing he's not. But he has some okay buffs in that weird Lore of Sigmar thing, but they're not amazing. They haven't scaled well into Warhammer 3, so he's just kind of been outclassed, and he's not that cheap. But he can be self-healing. He can be unbreakable. So he's not terrible. Boris Todbringer, another A-tier lord. He has the same model type as Karl Franz, but he serves a different purpose. So his Hippogriff, his Griffin mount, keeps him in out of trouble like Franz's does. Good mass, terror, armor piercing, all that stuff. But whereas Franz is like a duelist damage support lord, Boris is a tanky debuff support lord. His self-healing means you can take a different caster than a life caster. His Crush the Weak and various other abilities are great versus specifically low leadership factions. So Boris is amazing for that. He's good versus Beastmen, good versus Greenskins and Skaven, whereas Franz likes to take the fight more to one specific enemy target and beat the brakes off of it. Boris generally likes to prey on the weak and push away a lot of cheap infantry or archers and stuff. So they just have very different roles, but they're both, I think they're equally good characters at different things. Balthazar Gelt, I'm going to put him in S tier. One of the best caster lords in the entire game. Crazy cheap, crazy inexpensive lord when you want him to be. You can take the Staff of Valunz for amazing power recharge, and then you don't need to bring Arcane Conduit, or you can bring Arcane Conduit and skip Staff of Valunz. Taking both is a little overdoing it. But anyway, if you take him with just his staff, on his flying mount, and with Plague of Rust and Searing Doom, he's 1,145 gold, which is super cheap. Or you can take him with Final Transmutation, and he's 1,150. So, really good Lore of Magic in the Lore of Metal. It is always one of the better ones. Insane power recharge, but he is an S tier because of his incredibly cheap price point and ability to get a nice flying mount in Quicksilver. Marcus Wolfheart is going to be our first Archer Lord that ends up in B tier. I need to shrink that whole profile, so I'm going to leave him out because he'll probably end up in the first row. But he's going to be the first Archer Lord to end up in B tier because of his supportive abilities. The Amber Bow is a really solid sniping thing, kind of like the Arrow of Kurnos, kind of. Not quite as good, but like similar to that type of ability. But he also brings an AoE net he can throw out, which is quite nice. And then he's a relatively cheap Archer Lord. It's his Archer stats aren't amazing. Similar to a Lethanar and the Princess and whatever, he has all those problems. But unlike a Lethanar and the Princess, he brings an AoE net, which the Empire likes to make great use of. Especially in front of handgunners or huntsmen, you just net something and instantly delete it. The Arch-Lector is what I was alluding to when we did Volkmar's section. He is just a worse Volkmar, which Volkmar was only kept out of D tier by his self-healing, so this guy doesn't even have that. The Arch-Lector is an abysmal character, very terrible, never take them. Huntsman General, unfortunately going to join him down there. All the problems of a foot archer, but without the high stats of the High Elves, like Lethanar has better stats than this guy in melee and whatever, and then no net from Marcus Wolfheart, so there's no real reason to take him. Master Engineer is going to end up in B tier. With his Steam Tank mount option, he can be solid. His Pigeon Bombs can clear out a bunch of infantry or cav blob or whatever, so he can be quite nice. Without his Steam Tank mount, he's pretty terrible, but if you take him, you're only taking him for the Steam Tank, and that makes him insanely tanky, especially if you pair him with Regrowth. He's never going to die. General of the Empire, unfortunately also in D tier. Not good enough at fighting to compete with Karl Franz, not good enough at debuffing to compete with Boris Todbringer. He doesn't have a role, unfortunately. There's literally no reason to take him over either of those characters. Oh god. 6 factions left. How many lords could they possibly have? Thoric Ironbrow was perpetually S tier. Now I think he finally falls to A. I think. Hopefully. He just lost the Rune of Hearth and Home entirely, which is a big nerf to him. And he got a gold increase. So, double nerfs. Probably take him out of S tier finally. He is a combat support caster lord for the dwarves. Which, not great. Like, that's hard to get down out of S tier. He took legitimately like 5 nerfs in a row, and he finally fell out of S tier. So his character type is just crazy strong, and that's why he's been so high for so long. The dwarves are not balanced around having casters. So then to take a caster lord, it's like, okay, but then at least your lord isn't a good combatant. Oh, he still is? Well, at least he's expensive. Oh, he isn't? Oh, shit. This isn't good. Thoric's not that expensive. Even after his cost increase, you can still take the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, the Ruth of Slowness. He's on his Anvil. And then I cut everything else. He's only 1,800 gold. So he's still very good. Very cost effective. I just don't know if he's truly S tier anymore. Still a very, very, very good lord. Rune Lord. You're going to go in C tier. A little cheaper than Thoric, but suffers a lot in the melee capacity. He is also a little tankier, though, unless his items have gotten changed. But I remember Gotrek used to take him for... Yeah, he can take the Gatekeeper's Belt, so he gets 40% damage resistance if his hit points are less than 25%, but he gets a base 20% missile resistance from the Master Rune of Grogny, which on his Anvil of Doom, he also has 15% missile resistance and 25% physical resistance. So you can get him up to like 60% total missile resistance if the resistance is if the missile is not magic damage. And with the Gatekeeper's Belt, he can get maxed out resist with damage resistance. So yeah. The Rune Lord, it can be tankier than Thoric, but he doesn't make up for it in enough other areas to really justify bringing him. Thorgrim Grudgebearer, we made a whole video on what Thorgrim needed. And he has not gotten those things, so he's still D tier. He is a melee buffing support lord of the dwarves when the dwarves are not currently focused on melee. And then they have better duelist lords in Ungrim and Grombrindle if they want it. So Thorgrim just doesn't buff what the dwarves need him to buff, and he isn't a strong enough melee combatant on his own to be worth taking. He's just kind of bad. Grombrindle, the white dwarf, our first unbreakable melee lord of the dwarves. He lands himself in B tier. A high price point holds him back a little bit, but he has good melee stats with 125 armor, unbreakable, magic damage, 500 weapon strength, mostly armor piercing. And then he has Flash Bomb, which is an insane debuff that he can throw out on a cooldown. And then he has the Rune X of Grombrindle to give a lot more damage, but also discouraged, making him decent against Greenskins. So Grombrindle is solid. He's often outshined by Thoric, but I am hoping with this patch, if Thoric got nerfed, which he did, Grombrindle might start getting to see some play, because he's not a bad character. It's just you had a better one, right? So Grombrindle, not bad. Makaisen. I think he's C. I think he's C. His shotgun rifle thing does okay damage, but with 0 armor, 4,000 HP, and 45 melee defense, this guy is insanely squishy. He does have a heal for the Thunder Barge or for his gyrocopters. I believe gyrocopters are war machines. Yeah, they are. So he can heal gyrocopters a little bit. He can give them ammunition, and that's mainly what gets him out of D tier, is that he can give gyrocopters more ammunition. So if you're doing a gyro box where you have like a Ironbreaker box on the ground, and then in the sky you're having gyrocopters kite everything to death, he can just give them restock, which is nice. Now you have a hero that can do that too, but sure. He can also give some buffs to ranged units, giving them really nice combos to do a lot more damage, but these are all kind of gimmicks that just take him out of D tier. I still think he's rather weak as a character, so he's in C. Ungrim Iron Fist. Ungrim is also joining Grombrindle in B tier. Whereas Grombrindle is a little more supportive, with like Flash Bomb being a really good debuff on your opponents and discouraged on his Rune X of Grombrindle being nice. Ungrim is pure damage. All he wants to do is damage. Damage all day. Heroic Killing Blow, Red Ruin, and Axe of Dargo all paired up gives him like 1,000+ weapon strength and a bunch of stats as he just runs at things and swings at them. But he has almost no abilities that support anybody besides himself. The only thing he has is Glorious Death, which helps other Slayers nearby. They have refused to die for a little bit. But yeah, no. Ungrim is just a stat stick that is ready to murder anything larger than him, which he's a dwarf, so most things are larger than him. Demon Slayer. Just taking a look at his kit really quick. Yeah, okay. Demon Slayer is going to be in C. It's funny because the people involved in my Discord are going to be like, if he's C tier, why is he limited on your Discord? Which he is. Demon Slayer is limited on our Discord with the Dragon Slayer, the hero. They're considered the same unit and limited to 1. This is not because the Demon Slayer is particularly strong. It's because we were trying to limit foot unbreakable, cheap hero hammer. So the Demon Slayer and the Dragon Slayer, more specifically, if you strip them down to butt naked, Demon Slayer's 900 gold, Dragon Slayer's 700 gold, and you could get 2 Dragon Slayers and a Demon Slayer and just have this crazy unbreakable foot blob that's annoying to deal with and like just tedious. It's just tedious, right? We're not talking about overpowered or underpowered. It's limited because people were like, well, that was annoying. I don't want to play against that ever again. But he himself is not actually that crazy. He has the Hammer of Carrick Draws, which is a really good debuff. Minus 40 melee attack and minus 30% weapon strength on a single target on a cooldown is very, very good. Other than that, he doesn't actually have that much good stuff, to be honest. Worthy Foe is kind of okay. Foe Seeker's okay. Deadly Onslaught kind of sucks for a dwarf. Glorious Death is okay, but yeah, he just lacks a lot. He doesn't have primary armor piercing. He does have really high weapon strength, good bonus versus large, good melee attack, but his low 0 armor, only 5,000 HP, and then 45 melee defense. He can get poked down by a lot of stuff, so he is aptly named because the only thing he really wants to fight is a large demon, since they don't have a ton of armor and his armor piercing won't matter. Belegar Ironhammer is going to go in B tier. Now, unlike Gorok, Belegar is Gorok, but on a roster that can use him. Belegar is cheap, relative for a dwarf. He is incredibly tanky, and that's all you really need out of him, right? That's all you need. He has some buffs for himself that can technically make him do more damage, but you don't really need it. He's not good at fighting stuff. He has bad armor piercing values and whatever, but you can just make him insanely cheap. You can take him for about 900 gold as his base cost, and that's honestly how a lot of people take him, for 60 melee attack and melee defense, 120 armor, very high leadership at 85. He's cheap. He's cheap and chipper. He's never gonna die. The basic lord is 700 gold base. A little less tanky than Belegar, and has some more supportive capacity, but not a ton. I'm honestly going to put him in C tier. He's not terrible. It's just there's better options. Like, Belegar is definitely tankier enough with his better stats to be worth the extra 200 gold, but they serve the same function. It's just like, if you pretty much don't want a lord for your build, just take the lord or Belegar butt naked and they'll do fine. Dark Elves. Oh my god. Why are there so many lords in this game? Why? Okay, Chaos Dwarves are coming. They only have 5. Bretonnia is coming. They only have 6. Beastmen are coming. They only have 7. We're going to get through this. Dark Elves have 10. Okay, Dark Elves. Malekith. So, don't hate me, but welcome to C tier. Malekith has fallen on hard times. He's gotten nerfed. Some of the spells he used to use got nerfed. A lot of things got nerfed since he was S tier OP taken in every game. He can still be on a dragon. He can still have Soul Stealer to heal himself back up. Never mind, he has Doombolt. Literally one of my biggest points was he doesn't have Doombolt. Never mind, A tier, Malekith OP. Strongest character in the whole game. So he has Doombolt. Doombolt is currently, when I'm making this list, cracked. It's an amazing spell, super powerful, and he does have access to it. Okay, so we're good. So, he has a good lore of magic in the pure lore of dark. For some reason, I thought he had a mixed lore, but he just has a pure lore of dark. So he can take the power of darkness and Doombolt for more winds of magic to cast Doombolt. He can take Soul Stealer to heal himself up on his dragon if he wants to. He has Gaze of Malice, which is really good at clearing out light infantry. And then, honestly, his items are pretty bad overall. Yeah. His items are weird and kind of jank, but sometimes they're useful. He is crazy expensive, but he usually pays for himself with using Soul Stealer to heal himself up on his dragon, and now with Doombolt to snipe out single entities, he can be pretty good. Pretty good. Very expensive, though. Debatably B tier. I'm going to put him in A because I'm currently on that Doombolt hype train, but yeah. Morathi! Welcome to B tier. Just last patch, she would have been A, and Malekith would have been C, but we are where we are because of Doombolt. Morathi has Wand of Crydon, which is a bound 2 casts of Doombolt, which is maybe the best spell in the game right now. And you might be like, wow, Human Boy, she has 2 free ones, and then she can cast Infinite Melkot's Mystifying Miasma because of life leeching and stuff, but she's only in B? Well, Wand of Crydon is the undercasted version of Doombolt, and she can't overcast it, so that actually makes it significantly worse. Now, she's not a bad character. She's in B. She's solid, good, fine. Just not OP, in my opinion. Power of Darkness is a good spell for her. Melkot's Mystifying Miasma is crazy strong on her because she has life leeching, the Lore of Death passive. So every time she casts a spell, she gets more Winds of Magic power reserves, giving her more spells to cast in the long run. So you want to just spam out the cheapest spell with her possible, and that's Melkot's, which is very good. And then she does have Soul Stealer to heal herself up if she's in a pinch. Greater Arcane Conduit gives her better spell mastery and fast Winds of Magic recharge. And then she does have the bound Doombolts. But she is relatively expensive. She's piss poor in melee combat. So those are both downsides to her. And then, like I said, Doombolt's on the upswing, so not having access to true Doombolt where you can overcast it is actually a pretty big negative for her. Khorne Hellebron is going to be C tier, D tier, D tier, D tier. Terrible. She's popular. People like her. She has some interesting rampage buffs for her nearby units, yada yada, whatever. Main problems. She's not that cheap. She's not a caster lord, so you have to take a caster hero, and she does not have immune to psychology base. So in the Legendary Lords tournament, both games that she lost because she terror routed when the Dark Elves needed her most. If she hadn't terrorized, she would have won both games. So it's pretty ridiculous that the Bride of Cain, the literal embodiment of frenzy, does not have immune to psychology. So she's like, oh, spooky monster, and runs away. It's pretty atrocious. Aside from that, if she had ITP, she might get into C tier, but not even close to B. Malice, Darkblade. C tier. He had his time in the sun, but that time is over. Malice is now just too expensive to not affect enough of the battlefield quickly enough. Very tanky because he has 2 health bars, has really good blob punishment abilities and decent dueling stats between using his different abilities on Malice or Zarkan, and then he does have constant healing with the Warp Sword of Cain. The main problem is just a Cold One mounted character has a hard time impacting the battlefield, and the meta right now is battlefield control and mobility, not holding a single point for a long time. And I know it sounds like you might be like, well, Conquest, he can hold the center point. The Dark Elves aren't a faction that likes to blob up and just withstand your damage. So he has a hard time with that strategy. Like, he can do okay on Conquest, but his army can't, so he'll almost always lose that situation. You're much better off taking the fight to the enemy like your roster is meant to, and just killing them off before the Conquest thing really becomes a problem. Rakarth, it's also going to go in C tier. Not a terrible lord, honestly, but his problem is he is just outclassed by a lot of other people on this. But if he was on a different roster, you might see more Rakarth. Has some decent self buffs, decent ally buffs. He has a little bit of weird jank around like super specific debuffs for terror causing monsters that are one-time use. Well, not one-time use, but single target. So I don't know. That's a little jank and odd, but he himself isn't a terrible duelist. Biggest problem is just being a black dragon lord with no source of healing, which you could just take Malekith, who has Soul Stealer, or the Supreme Sorceress, who can also have Soul Stealer. So or Lokir with his Helm of the Kraken Lord. So being the only black dragon mount that can't heal is pretty bad. Oh, I suppose the Dreadlords can both take black dragons and not heal. I suppose we'll get to them when we get to them. Lokir, also C tier. So Lokir has self-healing, and he can be on a black dragon, but that's where the good things stop. He does not have good supportive abilities, so he is only supposed to be a duelist lord, and he has decent stats for that, but not incredible stats for that for his price point, which is very high. On Maelstrom, with his abilities that you want, he's 2,500 gold, which is a pretty penny, and he only gets healing when he's in melee, and dragons hate to be in melee for long periods of time with infantry or even cavalry in some cases. So you can have a hard time truly applying that healing. And then if you take a 2,500 gold lord and you just have him chase stuff off the map to get healing, sometimes the battle can be won or lost while he's busy doing that. Okay. So the Dreadlords, both D tier. Neither of them have impressive melee or ranged or buffing abilities. Neither have a lot going for them. And on a roster with some of the best, most I'm going to carry the whole game lords, there's just no reason to take these guys. Like, Morathi's only in B tier because there are better options, but Morathi would be an incredible lord on most rosters. So taking these half-assed pieces of shit is pretty whatever. Hi, Beastmaster. I'm also going to put him in D. I know there's this weird trend popping up, people trying to take him as a cheap Scourgerunner Chariot Lord who has a Tormentor's Sword for the net, but that's an AoE net only around him. It doesn't last that long. I don't see it. I don't think it's worth it enough to take him personally. I don't know. I'm not seeing what some people are seeing with High Beastmaster. I'm ready to be wrong, but he's kind of the worst parts of Rakarth without much of the upswing. Where the hell is my sorceress? What? You what? Okay, I guess we're just ignoring the S tier lord. My bad, gang. All right, calm down. Just gotta do a little bit of photoshopping real quick. When you do everything by hand, sometimes you're gonna make little mistakes. That's okay. We all make little mistakes. We all make little mistakes. Calm down. Calm your whole body. Boom, there she is. Welcome to S tier. So if you don't want to pay an arm and a leg for Malekith, and you do want to overcast Doombolt to automatically win games, you can take this lady. She has a good mixture of spell lores. Beast, Dark, Death, Fire, Shadows are all very good. She has Arcane Conduit. She's relatively cheap. She even has Opal Amulet to give herself some damage resistance against enemy spellcasts, which is nice. She can take a Black Dragon mount and be a good hybrid caster if she takes Lore of Dark for Soul Stealer, but these days you're going to often see her on her Pegasus with Doombolt and just spam some fools. But let's see. So Pegasus, Arcane Conduit, and Doombolt. 1350. Very reasonable for a caster. Not nearly as cheap as Gelt, but Doombolt is so strong that she does make it into S tier. Very good. Demons of Chaos. Okay, so we did end up with these half-assed idiot lords. Grand Vomitus, a Nurgle caster lord guy with pitiful weapon strength, terrible stats, and a weird heal ability that often doesn't work. All right, D tier. And I hit the R key again, so I moved the stupid video because I'm stupid and dumb, and god damn it, now I have to stop the recording and make a note. All right, we're back. What are we doing? Grand Vomitus was D tier, yeah. He's just a Nurgle flying caster demon guy, but pretty expensive, pretty terrible, not worth your money. Red Ogre, Prince of Slaughter. Not bad. B tier lord. Almost A. He's almost A, but he's gonna end up at B. He's a flying demonic lord of Khorne, but he has Gore Feast, which is really good. So it's a self-heal whenever he's in melee, which Khorne lords would kill to have. Then he still has Deathbringer and Demonic Onslaught, so he can actually buff up his damage by quite a lot. Then he has Paragon of Carnage, which is ass, so you just want to cut it. Fueled by Rage is okay, but I'd probably cut it too. Mainly Deathbringer is what you want. And if you take him with just Deathbringer, then he's 2,350 gold, which is reasonable for his stat line. His stat line's pretty darn nice. And then Gore Feast, that self-heal is great. So, yeah. He's good. He's a good lord. A good guy. Good guy. That is Caress, the Darkling Prince. So it's the Slaanesh one. He has Rampage, though Pavane was just nerfed pretty heavily. And then he doesn't have a lot to make up for it either. Yeah. Caress, the Darkling Prince is going to go into C tier. Can be useful as armor sundering, I guess. Rampage caster, but he's not very good. His stats are solid enough-ish. Mortal Blow is okay. But what if he takes just Pavane for the Rampage? And then just Mortal Blow. He's only 2,200, so he's kind of cheap for this demon-type lord. But not great. Still C tier. Then we have Svarik, the Feathered Prince. Svarik's A tier. He's actually really good. Oh no, A tier has to shrink for once. Ah, shit. Svarik is a Tzeentch caster, which the lore of Tzeentch is pretty nice. We have no complaints about the lore of Tzeentch. Well, when we're using it. When I'm against it, I have plenty of complaints. But Great Arcane Conduit, very solid for extra spell mastery and power recharge. But then he also has Gaze of Fate, so he has the Kairos net ability. So he has a self net. He has really good Winds of Magic generation. He has a good Lore of Magic. He has solid melee stats, but especially in melee, he applies Warp Flame. So he gives anyone he hits 10% damage, more damage to fire damage, which he also deals fire damage. So anybody he hits in melee, he automatically gives himself a 10% buff on damage, and he lowers their armor by 10. And he has barriers. So Svarik is very good. Has a lot of internal synergies. On to the Chaos Dwarves. 3 factions left. I can do it. I can hang in there. Drazoeth. Drazoeth, cousin. You want to go bowling down in D tier where you belong? Drazoeth is a Lore of Hashut caster, which the Lore of Hashut is maybe the worst Lore of Magic in the entire game. Maybe. Not great. He is very expensive. Prohibitively expensive. And then he has a mount that's even crazier in cost. Drazoeth is just terrible. Like, he's done dirty by having one of the worst Lords of Magic in the game and a crazy high price for no reason. Some of his abilities are okay, but you're putting him on a character that already costs you way too much, so putting abilities on him makes him even more expensive. He's just too expensive. He's terrible. Astrogoth Iron Hand. Welcome to A tier. Not quite an S tier lord, but still very good. Incredibly tanky for a foot lord, with a high speed for a foot lord because of his little mechanical legs, but he has a high HP pool, very high armor, good mobility, good mass. He has some solid abilities, and his mixed spell lore is fine. Not incredible, but it's fine. He has what he needs out of it. Big things is that he synergizes well with the Chaos Dwarf roster because he has Kindle Flame, so he can cast Cascading Firecloak or Burning Wrath or Flaming Sword of Ruin, just some cheap spells, and get global 20% more fire damage, which synergizes with himself well because he also does fire damage. But he can also take Flamestorm to punish blobs, so yeah, he's good. He has a lot of good things going for him. Just no mount options is the only thing that holds him out of S tier, which makes sense. I'm not saying it's a problem, but not being able to diversify what you can do on the battlefield is limiting. Sorcerer Prophet would have been S tier until this patch, but they just took a pretty meaty nerf. Their heal, the Blood Chalice, is no longer, or the Chalice of Darkfire, or whatever the hell. It's no longer global, so they actually have to be next to whoever is casting the spells to get the healing, which is pretty painful. But they are still a good lord that has 3 good lores of magic and then the lore of Hashit. You have the Vial of Hashit, which can be good for like sniping out one target once. But you have a Bale Taurus mount, which is very insane. Or if you wanted to, you could take a Lamasu mount and be a weird silencing monstrosity. But usually you just see them on the Bale Taurus. Makes them very tanky, makes them good melee combatants while also being your caster lords. Still quite solid. Bale Tauruses are very strong, but definitely falling out of S tier without that global heal. Zatan the Black. Ugh. People who watch my streams will be surprised I'm not putting him in D tier, but as much as I hate him and he has disappointed me greatly, I don't think he's actually D tier. I do think he's bad and he's in C tier. But the one thing is he does have a very long use net. And with his Lamasu mount, he can also be a silencer. So he can make it really annoying to keep a caster lord moving and casting. But Zatan's in C because he's not going to be good enough to follow up on that and do good damage. I also hear he's good in domination, so that also bumps him up a little bit from D. But Boundless Cruelty sucks. It takes too many models to charge up for a whopping -8 leadership. Wow. So it's pretty bad. A lot of his items are pretty bad. His mount options aren't very good. And he's expensive and he's not a caster. So Zatan has a lot of negatives with very few positives. The Overseer is going to go in D. You might as well just take the Sorcerer Prophet. Overseer has not the Bale Taurus mount. He can only take the Great Taurus or the Lamasu. He has Standard Eye, which is okay, Foe Seeker, which is okay, and the Black Gem of Nar, which he makes himself invulnerable to damage, but also loses 100% of his melee attack. He's just a weird gimmick lord that's not good, and then you need to still take a hero caster. The only positive about him is he is pretty darn cheap. 700 base gold cost. On his Lamasu, he's 1400 base cost, but that's not enough. Bretonnia, the end's in sight. 2 more factions. We can do it. The Fey Enchantress B. Fey Enchantress has suffered like a L'Oreal from the test of time. Her Mortis engine effect of the Mists of the Lady or whatever just has not moved into Warhammer 3 well. It doesn't do that much damage. It's one of the lower damage Mortis engines in the game. And then she herself now takes a ton of damage. With 15 armor and less than 4,000 HP on foot on her mount, she has less than 5,000. She gets killed by basic infantry all the time. So she can't really function as a Mortis engine very well. Now she is in B tier. She is relatively cheap. You can take her with Regrowth and Earthblood for less than 2,000 gold. I honestly, I've been cutting the Mists of the Lady and make her cheaper. But anyway, she's nice and cheap. If you take off some of her abilities, she has a bound Comet of Cassandora to cast because of her Chalice of Potions. And she has the Favor of the Fae, which is a huge buff. 40 melee attack at will onto any of your characters is quite nice. You can just throw them on like Knights of the Realm and make them brick shit houses, which is fun. Arcane Conduit, so good wins magic regen. And then on Silver Run, her Unicorn mount, she has insane resists. Blessing of the Lady gives you 15% damage resistance. Then you have 60% spell resistance from the Unicorn. So if anybody tries to kill you with like Spirit Leech or Rance of Visitations, they're doing 75% less damage. So she's good. Prophetess, just kind of a worse Fey Enchantress. Not that much cheaper. Don't have as good of supportive abilities. They have to pay for Blessing the Lady while the Fey Enchantress just gets it base cost. And they don't have a unicorn mount, which is interesting because the damsels have unicorn mounts. The hero has it, but not prophetesses. Prophetesses get a Pegasus or a warhorse. But yeah, not great. They have Beasts, Heavens, and Life. Beasts is good, Life is good, but Life is the main one you usually want. The Fey Enchantress already brings that. You can bring a one-time use Assault of Stone, which is kind of niche and fun, gimmicky, but it's not worth it to take these guys, and they're just really squishy. Whereas the Fey Enchantress actually has more HP than them on her mount, and she also has the spell resist, so Fey Enchantress is also tankier. King Lewin Leoncoeur. That is an S tier lord. Very, very good. Tanky, supportive, debuffs enemies in a way that Bretonnia needs. He reduces their armor and melee defense, which makes him amazing at helping out in cav fights, especially for his Knights of the Realm, which are some of your best knights in the whole game for their cost. But their big thing is they don't have armor piercing. Well, then Lewin lowers their armor and makes things, well, lowers the enemy's armor, not his own, obviously. He has self-healing as long as he doesn't rout for the first time. And I believe, did he finally get Perfect Vigor? No, he has not gotten Perfect Vigor yet, despite the fact that he's a Grail Knight, but oh well. Like Karl Franz and Boris Tidebringer, he can be on a Griffin, Hippogriff type mount. So he has good mass, good animations, can get out of most situations. Pretty darn tanky. He's good. He's really good. We are Lewin stance. And he can bring the Lion Shield for his spell resistance and missile resistance, making him hard to snipe out with Spirit Leech or Rance of Visitations or something. Yeah, he's good. Blessing the Lady, of course, gives him 15% damage resistance like most other Bretonian lords. Alberic de Bordelot. I'm going to put him a little below Lewin. He has enough things that are worse than Lewin to be worth putting him a little lower. No self-healing is a big one. Now his roster has abundant access to the Lore of Life, so it's not like you can't get it, but you do have to bring a life caster no matter what, whereas Lewin can be more flexible. We can get a Flock of Doom caster friend. But Alberic is a little bit more consistent of a buff lord with his constant Braid of Bordelot around him, plus 12 bonus versus large for everybody, and Strider, which can help take out debuff effects from like terrain. Wrath of Manon is a good wind spell versus low leadership factions especially, and he still has a good mount in Tempete. He does a bit more damage than Lewin overall. So Alberic's nice. Alberic's good. He has anti-large where Lewin doesn't, so he's a bit better of a monster killer with 30 bonus versus large. That gives him 82 base melee attack versus large targets. Rapunzel de Lioness, D tier. I want her to be good. I keep trying to make her good, and she is just not. Has really good buffs for the units around her, debuffs for enemies around her, decent combat stats, but being just a less than 5,000 HP combat character is really rough. No self-healing. And then her only mount option is a basic warhorse. So her mass is terrible. She gets stuck in things very easily. Like if she plows into infantry, she'll have a hard time pushing her way out. If she ends up in a cavalry fight, she can't even make her way to the front of it to at least get in combat with the enemy. She just really struggles from being a horse combat lord. The basic Lord of Bretonnia, also D, has some very underwhelming and generic abilities. Not that much cheaper than Lewin or Alberic when you take him on his mounts, so there's no real reason to take this guy, unfortunately. And of course, he's not a caster. So even if you're just going with like, I want to go crazy cheap, then why aren't you going crazy cheap with a caster? Because you have to pay for a caster hero, so you're not even going cheap anymore. Why are we doing that? Don't do that. Final faction. We can do this. Beastmen. Malagor just got double nerfed. I think he got individually nerfed, and then Flock of Doom got nerfed. I still think he's an S tier lord. Very, very small. Super hard to hit with ranged fire of any kind. crazy fast with 110 base speed, decent leadership for a Beastman. He does have a low HP pool, but his main thing is just staying in the air and never taking damage. And he can fly fast enough to dodge overcasting, so whenever he overcasts, as long as he's moving, he can't get hit. Has some decent buffs for his allies and debuffs for his enemies in the leadership department, but mostly he just has insane Winds of Magic regen and a good mixed lore of magic. Block of Doom is great in most situations, even after the nerfs. Doom and Darkness is situationally very good. Pendulum just got a buff. I haven't tested it out yet, but it did just get buffed. And then Mantle of Gorok is low-key a very, very good spell. So he has 3, maybe 4 great spells in his kit. He's cheap-ish. He is very tanky if you keep him off the ground. Malgor's still great. Torrox the Brass Bull, A tier. Not seen often just because of Malagor's relative dominance of the Beastmen meta. You know what? We're going to get a little silly at the end. This is like a 5-hour-long video. We're going to turn Torrox sideways to fit him right in there. He's just going to peek out from under those people. He's going to be like, hey guys, how's it going? Torrox, pretty expensive, but he does do fire damage, so if you're worried about your opponent's healing or anything, you can stop all that nonsense. Brass Body can make him very tanky against spells or anything with his 40% damage resistance, but mostly you're taking him for his insane Minotaur stats, the Slaughterer's Call, helping everybody around him have more melee attack and leadership, which the Beastmen love, and then his insane animations from the beautifully designed Minotaur animation kit are just fantastic. So, yeah. Torrox is good, but not S tier. Great Bray Shaman just took some nerfs in the last patch. I'm going to put him down in D tier. Still kind of hard to justify taking them when Malagor exists. They did get nerfed. They have Beast, Death, Shadows, and Wild, so still good spells, but they don't have great abilities. They don't have good items, honestly. Forbidden Rod is neat, but these guys have no healing and low HP pools, so damaging yourself like that is brutal, especially on a roster that needs their lords to still be alive. So I don't love that. So their abilities and items are all pretty bad, except for Arcane Conduit, and then that's about it. But you could take Malagor. Now, B tier isn't bad, right? It's B tier. They're fine, just not, like, strong. Beasts together, strong. Morgard the Shadowgave. Chaos Spawn just got buffed, and he is still very, very tanky, so I'll put him in B tier. Morgard is a foot self-regenerating tank lord. He's just supposed to wander in and be a nuisance. Has a bound Chaos Spawn summon that happens without his will if something gets low enough, and he has a Chaos Spawn summon he can use whenever he wants to. He's not that expensive if you take off his other 2 abilities. He's only 1,600, so he can be nice. He can be. And you can just take a Hero Caster, which are fine. But Morgar's good where Chaos Spawn are good, and Chaos Spawn just got buffs, so I imagine we'll be seeing a little bit more of Morgar these days. 3 lords left. Doombull. Lay down next to Torrox. Hey, we're laying down under A tier. All right, Doombull. A lot of the same nice things to say as Torrox. He has a really good animation set. He is solid at that. And he has a nice debuff. Whenever he hits something that gets dazed, it loses a quarter of its speed and 10 melee defense. I know Domination was taking him a ton. I don't know if they still are, but he is good at just getting in a fight and staying there for a really long time. He's not that expensive. Compared to Torrox, he's a little bit cheaper. You keep Slaughterer's Call, you can cut Deadly Onslaught and Barbed Knuckle Boxing. He's only 1450 for almost 7,000 HP, 100 armor. Yeah, he's solid. So nothing to really complain about, just a solid stand and fight lord. Torrox is a little better at sniping out specific things, but he's also more expensive. Khazric just got buffs. I'm going to put him in a tentative C tier. I don't have much data on him yet, but I don't feel like the buffs were big enough to take him out of C. Honestly, before the buffs, I might have put him in D, so maybe we're already factoring in the buffs to Khazric, but a relatively cheap Chariot Lord with a decent buff, an Apocalyptic Vision. Darkmail, if he's in melee, makes him kind of tanky, but he's not that tanky on a Chariot, honestly. Not high melee defense, not high HP pool. And Scourge is okay, but he generally just kind of suffers from being a Chariot guy when Chariots aren't living their best life. And then we have the Beast Lord. Beast Lord, I'm going to put in B, which is funny because Khazric's in C. In most cases in the game, the generic version of a Legendary Lord is worse. But the Beast Lord is actually better than Khazric in my opinion, just because he has the Horn combo. He has the Horn of the First Beast, and then Apocalyptic Visions, which give overlapping buffs. So you don't want to cast them at the same time. But if you take this guy on a chariot, he's cheaper than Khazrak, and you have 2 different plus 24 melee attack buffs and 2 different leadership buffs. One is plus 16, one is plus 8. And you just cast them one after the other, right? So you can make this crazy sustained charge of just running into something, boom, 24 more melee attack. And then when that finally wears off, your enemy's like, oh, finally, it's over. Boom, 24 more melee attack. Why? Why? Why is this happening? So it's pretty fun. I like him. He's a solid B tier. I think he's best paired with Centaurs with great weapons, because Centaurs have crazy low like melee attack and melee defense, but then when you buff up that melee attack, they just kind of slam fools. So I like him for that. He's okay. He's not up in A or S tier. He's just kind of okay. And we did it! Jank and silliness and craziness and nonsense, and I kept accidentally moving the tier list around the screen, which is going to make editing this a pain in the ass. But we did it! There's every lord in the goddamn game. I don't know how long this video was, but it's done. And with that, I have ranked 9 different types of basic units. I have ranked every spell, I have ranked every hero, and I have ranked every lord. We're done. We did it. It's over. GG. No more tier lists. There'll probably be more tier lists. People are suggesting I do tier lists of units within a single roster. People are suggesting I do tier lists of units in campaign, like whatever. There'll be more. We'll sprinkle them in. I mean, their viewership is crazy better than the rest of my content. They get more subscribers than the rest of my content, etc. So we'll sprinkle them in because we're not idiots, but this isn't going to become just a tier list channel. We just had a good series. Good series I wanted to finish out, so we got it done. Bye. Rawr. Subscribe, yes.